couldn't see how that the Madre faded this time.
Do you want to wait until Bruce comes back with coffee?
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order Tuesday, February 10th, 2015. And Madam City Clerk, we'll do a roll call.
Mayor John Harabedian,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Caposcia,
Here?
Council members Rachel Arizmendi,
Here.
Denise Del Mar,
Here.
Jean Goss.
Here.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Arizmendi is going to lead us in the pledge and invocation.
Please stand. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Few months ago, I think my fellow council member Del Mar said she gets all of the good holidays. Well, this time I think I do. I have Valentine's Day and also our President's holiday and month. Don't worry, I will not recite a poem or a sonnet, but I do have a quote here I thought that was very relevant and for the work that we do and reminding us why we are here today and why all of you are here. And this is from Franklin D. Roosevelt. Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power above us, over us. The ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president and senators and congressmen and government officials, but the voters of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think everyone's had a chance to review the agenda. Any changes?
Yes. I'd like to pull one item out of the consent calendar,
Okay.
and that is the item regarding the pool contract for replastering. And I
That
would,
is 1D.
yeah, I think that's it,
Okay.
yeah.
Or 1D.
Staff does have a few items. There is no report out of closed session because we did not hold a closed session. Regarding 1C, the contract for Gentry Brothers, you'll notice that the amounts are different in the first column versus the second column. It's 372,000, and in the recommendation is 352. 352 is the correct number. On D, we will discuss that one further, but staff is recommending that we reject these bids and rebid it for the pool. And that concludes staff's
Okay.
changes.
Any other changes? With that modification, I'd take a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Is there s-
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that is unanimous. How about the minutes? Any changes to the minutes?
None for me.
None for me either.
I'd like to make some changes to the minutes, please.
Please.
This is a change to the minutes from the last meeting, January 27th, 2015. This is when I spoke on after item number 4. I'm here to speak on behalf of my mother, Colleen Allen. Our water target numbers are extremely low. Our summer number is 14 and our winter number is 12. My mother would like the council's assistance in obtaining a resolution to our situation. For reasons of health and safety, as well as the ability to maintain our property, we need higher water numbers. The problem began on June 7th of 2013. Every water customer received a target number. We received 12 units. About 6 weeks later, we received a second letter. Each water customer would now have 2 targets, one for summer, one for winter. We received 14 units for the summer, 12 for the winter. Each day I log our water usage. By early September, we realized it would be impossible to stay within our target numbers. We polled our neighbors. One neighbor with approximately the same size property and the same number of people in the house had been assigned 52 summer units. A second neighbor whose property is a little larger, but there is one person in the house, was assigned a 40 summer units. We were assigned 14 summer units. We appealed on September 4th of 2013. We turned in an application and attached a letter to it. We received a letter back from the city on October 16th of 2013. The city awarded us one additional summer unit. The winter units remained the same. On August 11th of 2014, City Hall sent us another letter. This was in regards to the mandatory 30% water conservation target. All the water customers were assigned new numbers. I believe this is when the current city council voted to require that the residents cut their usage back another 10%. We were assigned 14 units for the summer. Essentially, the city took back the 1 unit we had gained through our appeal. The winter unit number remained the same. On August 26th of 2014, my mother spoke to Laura Hodges at City Hall. Director Karen Schneider had resigned. Ms. Hodges told my mother that she would have to reapply. There was a new application with new questions. It was in-depth and involved more tracking. My mother asked, "Who is in charge of my appeal now?" Mrs. Hodges did not know. We filed a second appeal on September 9th, 2014. It included our original letter and an update letter. The city's application states that a decision must be made within 10 working days after receiving the appeal. The city is supposed to notify the appellant by mail. Since that date, September 9th, 2014, we have had no response from City Hall. Tonight's staff report claims that 70 other applications have not been processed. We are frustrated that this has not come to a resolution after such a lengthy period of time. The fact that this issue has not resolved in a timely manner feels very unfair because now we are facing the possibility of a new policy being implemented. We are facing the possibility of severe fines and a home inspection. My mother is opposed to a home inspection on principle. She feels it is an invasion of privacy. My mother received her water records for the past, reviewed her water records for this past several years, including her usage prior to the base year. She is requesting 45 summer units and 31 units. We hope the City Council will assist us in this matter. Thank you very much. Mayor Harabedian asked the city manager, is there any way to have staff look at their historic water usage? And the city manager responded, we can take a look at it. Mayor Pro Tem Kaposha said, I think there is another mechanism that is proposed. Mr. Inman was going to create a calculator, and if you met the criteria of that calculator, that would be your new water conservation target. You will be okay with that process, Kaposha said. These standards are established with other water districts. I think you will be okay. I think we need to go through the process and understand what is being proposed, and then we will make modifications to them as necessary. My own personal opinion is that somebody who is using 12 to 13 units of water should not have something imposed on them, and I thought we had that in place. The city manager said that there's a minimum of 12 units in the ordinance. Councilmember Del Mar asked, could we have the staff look at the historical usage? The city manager said, we will. Mayor Pro Tem Kaposha said, we understand the problem. And Councilman Del Mar said, we will make sure staff works with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm not sure if you got all that, but,
Well, she gave me a copy of what she said tonight, so if you approve,
Yeah.
I will put all of this in the minutes.
is it possible to put them in and give us another week to review so we don't have to review all that now? I assume it's right, I assume it's correct, but I'd probably be more comfortable approving these minutes with the minutes next council meeting. It gives everyone more time but thank you.
Or do we need to approve them at all? Can we approve?
That's what I'm
both
saying.
minutes?
Approve the whole set of minutes
Yeah.
next week with those additions.
Sure.
Is there a problem with that, Madam City Attorney? Okay. Okay.
You continue it.
Would you please make sure that it's early in the evening? This has happened before, and I was forced to wait till the very end of the evening. It was very late, like 11 or 12 o'clock. This was
What-
years ago.
Oh, what
I
was
just
that?
want the item not to be last.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be
Well, you mean the minutes or?
Whatever you're transpiring to do for the next meeting
Yeah,
regarding
yeah.
these minutes, it
It
would
will
be great.
be,
if
it will
early
be
in the
right
evening.
at the beginning.
Okay,
All right.
terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen on Grove, I have a much shorter, I just took pieces from the transcript of what we had said, and they are as follows. I said, I think the problem really began in the sense that we started conserving before, and so our numbers were low, and then we were penalized even more. It feels unjust. Kaposha, understand, we get that, we want to fix that. City manager, Bruce's formula will help that. I said, also, I would like to ask the city to hold true to what they promised to do and read the meters, the water meters, the second Tuesday of every other month. I had one incident where I met 14. They did not come on the assigned Tuesday. They came on Wednesday, and I had 15. I think you're creating a moving target. I had already spoken to my neighbor Nancy Walsh, and she had helped me correct this. I'm feeling frustrated with the way it's been handled. I'm conserving water. I want to do the right thing. It's a long-term goal, so please help me. Kaposha, we will fix it. Caribbean, we will fix it, and to all those folks at home, if anybody is experiencing similar problems, come talk to us. I don't think you're alone. I said, there are 70 other people. Why didn't I get a notification? I didn't understand why. If I turned in my application in September and in 10 business days, here it is in January and nothing. Kaposha, that slipped through the cracks, and I will apologize for the city that happened. Del Mar, perhaps a communication should have gone out to the 71 families. Kaposha, we'll try to get that right next time. We're going to decide on modifications to the ordinance, not tonight. We're going to do it next week, and hopefully we'll get that buttoned up. City Manager, but in the meantime, we can look at the historical. Relook at the numbers. Use the formula. We can do that now. We don't need to wait for the council to make a decision. Caribbean, and would staff mind calling the Allens? City Manager, we will. I said, thank you, John and John. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will review those modified minutes next meeting. Thank you very much. And we will go on to mayor and city council reports. And did I start on my right last time? You want, all right,
I don't have anything.
okay. That was easy. Councilor Goss?
Let's see, just a couple things. I was at the Senior Community Commission meeting as the council liaison last week, and had the privilege and pleasure to be at the Citizen of the Year banquet honoring Dave Loera, who I see is here with us tonight, and just wanted to congratulate him again, and also give a hats off to the Chamber of Commerce that just did a beautiful job putting that event together.
I don't have anything to report at this time.
Yeah, just to point out that Mr. Loera, Citizen of the Year, is here with a couple of his fellows from the VFW, and they're going to talk a little bit. So I just want to, when we go to public comment, I'd like them to come up first, if that's okay for the audience there. And that's all I have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll echo Councilmember Goss's appreciation of the event. The Citizen of the Year, Mr. Loera, and the Chamber, everyone had a great time, and it was a well-deserved honor, and the Chamber did a great job hosting it. So that was a fun night. And also I wanted to report that the COG is getting a new executive director. Our executive director, Andrea Miller, she had a one-year contract and is actually moving on to become the city manager of the city of Covina. And we are hiring a interim city executive director, Fran DeLatch, who was the former executive director right before Ms. Miller. And his last stint was as the interim city manager of the city of Monrovia. So he has experience with the COG. He's also been a city manager at a few different cities, and I think he'll do a great job. But I'll give you any more updates. I think he's planning on being with the COG for a few months while they search for a permanent replacement. And that's all I have. And now we'll open it up for public comment for items not on the agenda, and we'll have the VFW 3208 start.
Mayor, Councilman, thank you for your kind words. As you know, I'm part of a committee which was organized by Congresswoman Judy Chu to raise $250,000 for a Pasadena community home base. This is to locate on Pasadena City College campus to house the Veterans Health Center of the Foothills. Pasadena City College is donating the land and approximately 30 parking spaces. The VA of Greater Los Angeles is providing the providers, and that's approximately $600,000. We encourage you to support this project for approximately 40,000 veterans residing in the San Gabriel Valley who must now travel to either Wilshire, Los Angeles, Long Beach, or Loma Linda for services. We have approximately 800 plus veterans on PCC campus, and it's the second highest in the nation, with many more returning to civilian status in the next 18 months. Accessible health care is foundational to sustained employment, and we need your assistance. Our post has pledged $10,000, and I'd like to thank Councilman Kocha for his generous donation this evening. So if you can and would like to donate, and I'm not asking the city, but just individuals, you can make your donations to Post 3208, and in the memo section, put PCC VA Health Clinic. Thank you.
Thank you. And where can they mail that?
P.O. Box 695, Sierra Madre, 91025.
695 Sierra Madre Boulevard?
No, Sierra Madre, California. P.O. Box.
Oh, it's the
It's a
P.O.
P.O.
Box.
box,
Sorry.
yes.
P.O. Box.
695 Sierra Madre. It's at the corner of...
Yep. It is for now. Hopefully they keep it there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David, before you go, just in case there's any questions.
91025?
Yeah. Mr. Loera, I just want to thank you for what you're doing, and just my comments in general. I just, the local VFW, by the way, committed to $10,000, and they also made a personal commitment to cover that cost if they could not raise the $10,000. And I'm just really impressed with that because, again, you know, these are not people of exceptional means, but this is so important to the veterans of the San Gabriel Valley that they took on this commitment. I'd like to just challenge everybody, just give what you can, even if it's $5, $100, whatever, but please don't leave these folks hanging with the rest of that commitment. And really, I just think Sierra Madre should be able to double or triple or quadruple that number. So please be generous. I mean, there's nothing better than we can do. The minimum we can do is to be able to provide adequate health care for these that have served our country. And certainly the need is there. So please, everybody, I just encourage you to be generous and support this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hear, hear.
Good evening. I'm Barry Ziff, and I'm here in the capacity of trustee for the library. And I have a couple of things I'd like to share with you this evening. All exciting events to share that's going on in the library. Number one is the Best Book Used sale set new world record this past weekend. They sold enough books to raise $2,652.75 in the 2 days that they sold the used books. And all this money goes to benefit our library. And I'd like to special thanks the Friends and Martha Trozen, who was the chair of the book sale, because that was a fantastic event. Also, I'd like to remind you, and I have flyers for you for the One Book, One City events. There have been several events that have taken place around town, and we still have several coming up. One is the scavenger hunt. We also write like Chandler, because we're reading Raymond Chandler's book. And also the third Thursday book club is meeting to discuss the book. And the Friends of the Library wine tasting is coming up the 20th of the month. And also we're having a murder mystery party at the end of the month. The other thing that's happening is you probably have noticed signs around town that say, love your library. So I'd like you to know that we have new signs, and anybody in the community is welcome to come and pick them up at the library to display your support of the library. So thank you very much.
Thank you. To remind everybody.
Barry made a very nice segue for me. I'm Pat Alcorn. The Friends of the Library wine taste will be on the 20th. There are only 18 tickets left for the premiere event.
Oh, my God.
So if you don't have your ticket yet, you can pick one up at the bottle shop or at the library. But the main event tickets are still available, and they're available at all of the other venues that we have mentioned. So if you'd like to give me a check tonight, I will pick them up for you and deliver. So let me know. I'll be at the council meeting all evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat.
Pat, just a question. Do you still need volunteers for the main? So I'll be volunteering for the premiere event as well, but, I mean, I bought my tickets,
All right.
so. But I just
Volunteers
encourage.
get to drink wine, right? Okay.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
paying for my
Yeah, I was
tickets, so
gonna
I'm
say.
drinking wine,
Right.
but I
Seems
just,
like a good gig.
yeah, just
Yeah.
encourage my fellow council members to volunteer to help out a little bit too. It's a lot of
All right.
fun.
I'll be
We're
there.
just serving, you
Yeah.
know?
I've already been wrangled in, so.
Okay, good.
Good evening, I'm Carol Parker on Mariposa. I would just like to say that I would hope that somebody would, on the council, would push for the passing of the general plan. It's been 5 years. It shouldn't be stalled anymore. There were 5 people that worked on it very diligently, and then they had to add 4 more, that made 9. I was involved way backstage. I did not write it. I learned a lot, but I did volunteer with a lot of other people, and I don't know why we can't pass it. And it shouldn't be another 5, 6, 8, 10 months. It should be right away, as soon as possible. So I would like the council to hurry up and do this, because we should not be stalling anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Yeah, we can respond to that.
We've done everything that we can. We're just waiting for the EIR. So as soon as that's done, and it takes a couple months, then we'll be able to approve it.
Carol, the
Hopefully.
council did approve the draft of the general plan, as council member saying that we're just waiting now for the EIR. So we're doing everything we can. We can. I don't know that that's going to speed it up, but, you know, we're really moving along on it.
Thank you. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Madam City Manager? For items other than 1D.
Right, other than 1D. Item 1A is approval of Resolution 1505, approving our demands. 1B is designation of a fire department vehicle as surplus equipment. It's a 1946 Seagrave fire engine that has been stored in a garage by the Rose Float Barn. 1C is award of a construction contract to Gentry Brothers for the construction of Phase 2 of the 2013-14 street improvement project in an amount not to exceed $352,975 for improvements on East Sierra Madre Boulevard and South Baldwin Avenue. 1E is second reading of ordinance number 1361, amending Chapter 15 of the Building and Construction, Article 15.20 California Plumbing Code of the City of Sierra Madre Municipal Code to add a new section 15.020.80 regarding gray water systems. This would be second reading. The ordinance would go into effect in 30 days. Item F is approval of Resolution 1507, adopting terms and conditions of employment for part-time employees. And G is authorizing staff to proceed with an RFP to solicit bids for an integrated library system. Concludes staff's presentation. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Yes, I have a couple, starting with demands. Let me pull it up here. Madam City Manager, I think I know the answer to this, if you can just confirm, but we've got a couple of line items for contract planning services. Is that for the building department to take care of the 2 vacancies that we had? Let me tell you which page. Page 5. There's a line item for $6,900 in the middle to contract planning services. Is that to cover the,
Page 5, I'm just getting to the right page. I want to make sure. I'm pretty sure it is, but I want to look at it to see, where do you see, page 5?
yeah, it's about.
Yes, contract planning services to PMC. That is backfilling for the vacancies we have in the department.
Yeah,
for
for the temporary
planners.
help.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question on the warrants.
Any other questions on the warrants?
I have one. On page 4, no, I'm incorrect, on page 3, for our legal fees, we don't have an invoice for the 2,100. I'm just assuming that that goes to the retainer too, they're just different funds that it's paid out for?
Correct. It would be our retainer services, our retainer is split between different funds.
Okay.
So that,
that's-
we could put ditto marks or something on the next line. You're correct.
It just looks funny with not an invoice number.
Okay. Any other questions on the warrants? Any questions on the fire department vehicle?
Okay, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, please.
Okay, on the fire truck, could we have our chief maybe explain how this came to be to where we're giving it to a private party, to explain a little bit more about what this person is going to do and what agreement we have? Yeah.
Sure. The guy's name that's going to be doing it is a guy named Alex Trapiner, something like. And the way we got a hold of him is one of our engineers, Ted Walters, who does. He also has a couple old cars, but he also does restoration of Coke machines and stuff like this. That's his business. So this is just an acquaintance of his that, because they're all in the antique kind of. I'm not really big on antiques, so. And we were talking with, because it's been down at this, it was in storage for probably about 10 years out of the city. And about 6-8 years ago, where it was stored, they'd sold the property, so they brought it back up. And it's been down in the storage area down there. And the engine on it, I don't know, whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago, a rod went through the side, so the engine's no good. So there's no engine. It always had problems with brakes, and that was where it all started because it had no brakes. But then, ideally, we wanted to keep it in town, and so for the last 5 years, I was trying to get maybe the fire association to build it up and do it, but there was no interest in it. And I was talking to Ted, and Ted said, well, maybe this guy would be interested in doing it. And he's kind of local. His shop is down in Rosemead somewhere, and his father has been in this antique business for forever. I mean, I think they got like 4 or 5 acres worth of stuff,
Mhm.
and he was willing to rebuild it, and he said he'll have it in our parades, our 4th of July parades, and I mean to have him put it in a parade, it's like Christmas for these guys, you know.
Yeah.
Instead of just sitting it, I get to put it in a parade. So I said it'd be a nice addition to having it just rot down there.
Well, yeah, what is the salvage value of it if it was sold for just scrap?
If it was sold, this is according to Ted, if it was in good shape and running, it would be worth about $3,500. There's not a whole lot of it. If has an engine but nothing's running on it, and it's about $600 to $800. Probably if I don't know, but this is a wild guess. Would be like maybe $300 or $400.
Yeah. So the fellow that's going to restore it, I mean, do we have any agreement with him? Is there anything in writing or?
Yeah, we actually he came by last night, and we had he signed an agreement that he will have it in our 4th of July parade and any other events city events.
Yeah, well, that's provided that he gets it running, but.
Well, right.
Well, just a scenario is that he's got it now, he looks at it and never quite getting around to getting the engine replaced. And
He's already looked at, in fact, a friend of his that lives up in Washington was down here, and they have a block. He has the block, and they're going to use the, the internal stuff to rebuild this block. He's hoping to have it ready for this 4th of July.
Really? Oh.
And I said, that's very ambitious.
Okay, my only concern was is that if he didn't go through with it, then we forego the salvage value. It's essentially, we gave away maybe a $600 donation to somebody. Is that a concern to anybody? I mean,
No, well, I was actually more concerned that the gentleman was going to restore it and then sell it for,
No.
a fair amount of money, and, we should have somehow partnered with him to do that, and that was going to be my question after you.
Yeah.
But you asked the question.
I mean,
if
we could put in that, I could get another agreement with that, we could put in that the city has first refusal or something of us.
I wouldn't mind that. I mean, my only concern is that, this was a very profitable venture for this guy, and he'll put, a few thousand into it, and then I didn't really know what the market is for old fire trucks, but they seem really cool. It seems like someone would want them.
like maybe you'd buy one and put one in your
I don't know.
garage.
It's pretty awesome.
What's your address?
Yeah, exactly. Deliver it. But I wouldn't mind a first refusal. I would like, if he's going to keep it and have it in our parade every year, that's great. To the Mayor Pro Tem's point, I didn't really know what the value was as is, but
Yeah.
if you think it's only a couple $100s, then
And knowing, I think his father was like this is one of the reasons why there was so much stuff, and he is kind of the same. I don't think he sells anything. Ever.
All right, well, if you can do that, I think that's a good idea. Just write a first refusal, and
Sure.
who knows if anybody be willing to come up with the money. Certainly, wouldn't expect the city to do it, but
Right.
it might be a fundraising kind of a thing, and we'd buy it and put it back in the garage. I don't know, but, but we can deal with that when it comes up. I do want to just correct the record here, because I did speak to a couple of firefighters, including Bob Spears, just to see what they felt about it. And everybody's in agreement that we have to let it go. But it says that Tony Lerner and Bob Spears restored the engine. And being a car guy, I thought, oh my God, how humiliating that you restored the engine and then you threw a rod. So I talked to Bob about that, and I tried to approach it really delicately, because I know that's really a sensitive thing if that happened to me. But he says that is not true. They did not restore the engine. They restored the truck. So just for the record, Bob Spears and Tony Lerner did not restore the engine and for it to then fail. So
Well, there's a miss because it's not a truck, it's an engine.
oh, the engine.
We don't have a, if you would like me to get a truck, I would be happy to get you a truck.
Okay, well, see, here's a non-firefighting guy, just doesn't know the difference,
well, no, because they're using
You're
the word
right.
engine
You're
in
right.
a different way. Well, I didn't pick up on that. So.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you. I didn't want to spend too much time on that, but it sounds like we're all in agreement on that. Okay.
Thank you, Chief. 1C,
1C.
Gentry Brothers.
Yeah, I just want to point out, that's another good news story for us, because again, we asked that they rebid that thing, and let me ask the city manager on that. I didn't really do the arithmetic. How much
Sorry?
money did we save on 1C by rebidding it again?
I'm going to have to ask Director Inman. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You know how much we saved?
I believe that was about $32,000.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
That's certainly worth mentioning. So thank you for going through the trouble to doing that. So just another, win for us.
Absolutely. More money for sidewalks and streets.
Yeah.
1D is pulled. 1E is gray water system, second reading.
No
No?
comment.
F, MOU,
F is the,
part-time employee
Yeah,
terms
can-
and conditions.
can I just ask that we just give a brief summary of, is there anything substantial that changed in this? I mean, the only thing I can see that's substantial on that is the fact that we're complying with the recent state law to offer sick leave for part-time employees.
Mayor and
Miguel
Honorable
Hernandez.
Mayor Miguel Hernandez, Mayor and Honorable City Council, is an ongoing effort. The city staff has been keeping up with the city rules and regulations, as well as providing staff and public transparency by creating terms and conditions of employment, which helps centralize the information in one document. As federal laws, state and federal laws change, city staff continually is updating city policies to reflect such changes. And yes, beginning July 1st of 2015, some part-time staff will be eligible to accrue sick leave. And the part-time terms and conditions of employment, Article 5, Section 1, provides a basic overview of the current legislative terms. And with any changes that occur between now and July 1st, we will keep the document updated with such changes.
To understand this correctly, what's new about it is that we actually have a document now. We didn't have a document for the part-time before, right?
That's correct.
So a lot of work went into doing this, and I congratulate you for that.
Putting all the information that pertains to part-time staff into one document, which is easy to locate and keeps everything centralized.
Just a minor thing. This is more a question for the city manager. Section 2, part-time employees shall not work more than 960 hours in a fiscal year without the express written consent of the city manager. And, you know, there's no issue with our current city manager, but say we did get another city manager that maybe was a little bit loose with the purse strings. I mean, is this something that may...
Purse strings. Yeah.
But maybe...
Sorry. Double entendre.
Okay, whatever.
Double, yeah.
But is this something that maybe should be, I mean, because it's, once you cross the 1,000 or 1,250 hour threshold, then the employee accrues new entitlements. And so to me, it's a really serious thing that we just really don't ever want that to happen, and I'm confident that it wouldn't happen in the near future, but is that something that maybe, you know, it should be anticipated that it might happen and the council should approve it? You know?
However the council would like it.
Yeah.
We do keep a close eye on these things, if you would like to change that, so it goes to the council for an employee going over 960, we can make that change.
Because you'd be getting to the end of the fiscal year before it happened, and so, once again, it'd be something that you could anticipate.
We would just not let it happen.
Well, I know you wouldn't.
It
yeah.
would be a very, it wouldn't happen. I can say, you know, worst case scenario, when something like this might happen, we run out of engineers in the fire department, and we need to make sure there's an engineer to drive the rig. And it's May, and we have a month left. Very extreme
Yeah.
circumstances when it has to happen for mostly public safety purposes, but it's a rarity. We watch it closely.
Okay.
To make sure that we don't trigger these other things. But if you would prefer that it be a bit more formal, that before that happens, it comes to the council, we can do it that way too.
And I would say that the reason we have that in there is because of the Affordable Care Act. If anybody works over, they say like 30 hours a week, then you have to offer them benefits.
Right.
Or the city will be fined. So any city manager would not let that happen. If they did, then that city manager would be fired, because that's a very important regulation that we have to keep on the books.
Right, so there's two aspects. One, to keep us out of trouble, but the other I was concerned about was to, you know, take on the burden of extra
Yeah.
benefits and
But the most important
entitlements.
one is the
I see.
ACA.
Okay, so anybody else concerned? I'm really not that concerned, I'm just pointing it out.
I actually don't like the idea of putting in the city council as the final say on that. I just think that stealing more of the operations. I mean, I understand what the concern is, but I'm wondering if there's a different way to address it. But bringing individual hours of employees to the city council, I think is beyond what we should be doing.
Okay.
And starting in 2016, every company, any employee over 50 has to have some mechanism in place to track all of this, and it has to be reported to the IRS. So
Okay.
it's watched very carefully.
Okay, all right.
Correct, city manager?
I'm just wondering, I mean, if it really is a concern, is if there's language you add in there about ensuring that we comply with whatever regulations. I don't even know if that's necessary, but if Mayor Pro Tem, if that's something you're concerned about.
No, I think that would reflect very poorly on the city manager if she let that happen without doing it, and I think she's got enough.
Watch hers closely.
Yeah, so, okay. All right.
All right. Thank you, Miguel. Item 1G, any questions? I had a few questions on item 1G. One, I couldn't tell from the staff report, is the cost of whatever the RFP is gonna cost us, which I don't think it's gonna be much more than, staff time. Had we budgeted this? I mean, was this something that
is-
we had foreseen?
The staff time to prepare the RFP?
Yeah, and everything that comes with
It's
it.
included in just regular staff time. There isn't a separate budget for staff time to prepare the RFP. The replacement of the system itself, the actual, what we're going out to bid for is not currently budgeted, but we do need to know the amount, so depending on what the council decides, we can include it in our next two-year budget.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess,
It's not something we were anticipating purchasing this fiscal year.
right, with the timing, that makes sense.
Mhm.
I guess I would just, my concern was, going out to an RFP, not knowing whether we'd really want to go down this road, depending on the budget. So I'm fine going down the road with the RFP, but I think once it comes time to make this decision, I mean, it's a fair amount of money. And, considering where we're going to be with the budget and probably in more of a cutting mode, I think we should consider, whether it makes sense right now.
Well, in that regard, it does help us for long-term planning.
It makes us know, right.
Because now we know that our system is becoming is obsolete, and, at some point it has to be done, so at least this gives us a good snapshot, so we're doing planning for the future, we know what those costs are gonna be.
Yeah, I mean, the question's always, I know that the system is kind of coming to the end of its rope. I feel like, in the city, we've kind of survived with assets going past, their technical lifespan. Our voicemail and telephone system, some other things, our ambulance. Not to say that this isn't needed, I just think that it's something that I'll look more carefully at when we come back from RFP. I think we're fine going out to the RFP, but.
I think it'd help us in our budget discussions, frankly.
Yeah.
I think, and particularly people who are watching us discuss the budget, it gives them more detailed specifics on exactly what we're facing.
What type of costs, right? Great. Thank you. We'll open this up for public comment. And seeing none, we'll come back. Unless there's any more comments, we can have a motion to approve all items on the consent calendar except for 1D.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item 1D, plastering of the pool. I think we can probably jump right in here with I'm sure we all have the same questions.
I would like to report that we did get confirmation from the city attorney that one of the things we think that's causing this to be such an expensive process at this point, public works contracts normally require what's called a Class A license, and that's normally what we request. We have discovered that the vast majority of pool contractors don't have a Class A license. They're Class C something. We did verify with the city attorney earlier today that we can bid a project requesting a Class C license, which is what pool contractors normally possess. So we would be recommending that you reject the bids this evening and authorize us to go out to bid with the, requesting the lower license requirements.
Okay.
Yep. That is fine with me.
You need a motion on that, or do we just?
Unless anyone has any
ignore it?
questions before, and I will just open this up for public comment. And we'll bring it back. Yeah, there was a big difference in the prices that Waterworks was getting and the prices that we were seeing. So I would be all in favor of rejecting these bids and going back out.
Same here.
And do you need a motion for that?
Yes.
Okay.
A formal motion to reject the bids.
I move to reject the bids.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Moving on to item number 2, city's water conservation ordinance and enforcement policies.
Take one and pass it around. This is just a PowerPoint presentation.
You going up?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Councilman. This is a PowerPoint thing, so if you want to shift around a little bit, that would be great. What we have done this evening is, rather than providing you the water supply update at the beginning of the meeting, we've combined it with this agenda item as sort of a lead-in to our discussion of the water conservation ordinance and the recommendations from the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Commission. So for January, we did well again as a city, conserving 27% over the prior January, saving 16.5 million gallons. And unfortunately, although those numbers looked good, notice that our gallons per capita daily increased from December's 110 to 131. So that particular number is going in the wrong direction. For February, so far, we're at under 1% over the same period last year. We've saved 100,000 gallons, and our gallons per capita daily continues to increase. And we did send one of our water department staff members out on February 3rd to just drive around town for an hour or so, and not in any particular neighborhood. He went through several different neighborhoods, and in that period of time he noted 27 different violations of the state's water use restrictions, such as watering on the wrong day or overwatering where the irrigation water is running down the street. This is my monthly comparison of Sierra Madre's gallons per capita daily versus other local communities as reported by the state. And again, for December we were looking really well, but those numbers have started to climb again. And notice that the state average continues to go down, which is good news statewide. And pretty much just about everyone, all the rest of the communities that we're following have their gallons per capita decreasing as well. In terms of our aquifer status, I have not updated this since the January 12th meeting, but we do continue to see the aquifer continuing to increase very gradually, and we're still looking at 23 months or so minimum to get to the 500-foot level. That's assuming all things remain the same. We're still well behind where we should be in terms of rainfall, with our average being 25, and we are pretty deep into the rainy season, and we've got just over 7 inches to date. So locally we're not doing real well. I subscribe to a daily bulletin that comes from the Department of Water Resources that lists headlines from publications around the state relative to our drought. And what I've done is just listed some of the headlines that were sent to us on February 2nd, some of the different publications that are listing what's going on with our drought. And the bottom line here is that yes, we've gotten some rainfall, but it has not been enough to resolve the problem. And then today's headlines were particularly concerning. There were multiple sources that were quoting Metropolitan Water District as indicating that they were considering making cuts in the water supply or beginning to ration water effective July 1st. And that is something that the board was going to be considering. On a brighter note, our turf rebate program continues to move along. We've received 47 applications. 42 have been reviewed. 34 of those are approved so far, totaling over $28,000. We still have over $19,000 left in the program, so we are still accepting applications, and anybody watching that's interested, by all means contact Public Works and we'll make sure you get an application. And actually, I just today signed the purchase order requests for the first 4 applicants that actually got their projects completed. So we've got some action going on. We've got some sod being removed. So getting into the recommendations from the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Commission, you'll recall that Council has directed staff to work with that commission to evaluate the effectiveness of our existing water conservation ordinance and the efforts to conserve water associated with that. As we begin the discussion, there's 2 separate conservation components that we need to keep in mind. One is the individual conservation goals that have been set under the ordinance for each customer. That is the 30% conservation level that we are at now. The second would be the state water waste regulations that were adopted by the council in June of 2014, for which we have an approved administrative citation program, which is completely separate from the individual conservation goals. The commission, after a good deal of discussion, recommended that the city begin enforcement of the water conservation ordinance, especially the surcharge for exceeding individual conservation goals. As you'll recall, the current ordinance calls for doubling the Tier 1 rate for the amount of the exceedance on a first violation, and for the second and further violations, it's a tripling of the Tier 1 rate. Commission looked at those surcharges and did not feel that they were enough of a deterrent to cut down on water waste. So they recommended higher surcharges for exceeding conservation goals. They linked the multiples, if you will, to the highest billed tier rate. For example, if a customer was highest billing level was in Tier 2, then they proposed multiplying the Tier 2 rate for that customer rather than the Tier 1 rate. And their range of multiples went all the way up to 10 times the highest billed tier rate for the amount of the exceedance. After we looked into that with Tyler, we found that the existing billing system simply could not handle that complex of a penalty structure, and we've essentially had to drop that particular recommendation because it simply won't work with our billing system. Staff is recommending that whatever the council decides to do, that we opt for setting penalty amounts by council resolution rather than building them into an ordinance, which would allow for simplifying the adjustment process. It won't require first reading, second reading, and 45 days. The second recommendation of the commission was to require a residential water audit prior to consideration of an appeal of the customer's conservation goal. Some of the issues around the water audit would be that it would be provided at no charge to the customer. The audit would be prepared by a water conservation certified staff member, or conceivably by a certified consultant hired by the applicant. Audit results would be kept confidential by the city. The audit would provide an opportunity to educate the customer who may not be aware of all the things that can be done to conserve water. The audit would also, and this is an important point, would include a review of customer water quality. We've been made aware that some of our customers are still seeing water discoloration, and we would be concerned about penalizing people for running more water in order to clear their water before use. So we would want to keep that in consideration during an audit. And the audit would provide the customer a water budget as determined by actually reviewing what's going on with the property, what types of landscaping is there, and how the sprinkler irrigation system is working. Now, this water budget could be either higher or lower than the customer's current conservation allocation. So it's a bit of a gamble for any customer. There's no assurance that this audit is going to provide a higher number or a lower number. Staff has come up with a recommendation that is similar but slightly different. We're proposing a 3-step process. First step, when we get the appeal notification, would be to check the math on the existing conservation goal to make sure that there wasn't a miscalculation. Second, we would use the water budget calculator that staff has developed to estimate what that property's water budget would be. And then third, if we still have not been able to meet the customer's needs, then we would require the water audit, which again would be free if done by city staff, or if the applicant is concerned about privacy issues or has other concerns about staff doing this, they can hire their own certified water conservation professional and provide those results to the city. Now this spreadsheet is essentially how staff's calculator works. It's essentially just an Excel spreadsheet, and the way this works is we simply enter information that we pick up, and in the case of some samples that I ran today, it is simply by reviewing assessor's information that is public record and reviewing Google Earth aerial topography and the city's GIS aerial maps. First thing we do is we enter the number of persons in the home. That will give us, times gallons per capita daily, that'll give us the indoor water use for that particular account. Then, using assessor's information, we get the size of the lot. We measure from GIS and Google Earth the area of all the structures and impermeable area on the site. In this particular instance, the lot's roughly 5,200 feet and the combined structure size is 2,500 feet. Subtract the structure area from the lot area, you get the landscaped area of the property. That's the easy part. Now we get into the technical stuff. To do this water budget, we also take into consideration the types of landscaping in the yard and the areas of landscaping, because each of the 4 types of landscaping has different water uses assumed. This comes from our water conservation ordinance that's in place. It also comes from industry standard plant factors, which is this column. So that's an indicator of the relative amount of water use for, in this instance, turf. So we calculate the area of turf on each property and multiply this across. That'll give you gallons per billing period. Same thing with the area of the yard that's in flowers. Going on further down the sheet, since it wouldn't all fit on one slide, we've got the area of the yard in trees and shrubs. Again, that's a different plant factor, lower number. And finally, the area of the yard in drought tolerance, which is a lower factor still. All of this then adds up to the number of gallons per billing cycle. We convert that to units, and that gives us a summer base. In this instance, we've calculated the summer base. Multiply that times 0.7, and that gives you the 30% reduction. Staff is proposing to put this on the website, on the city's website, so that residents can enter this information themselves and do this calculation for themselves if they so desire. One of the things we found, staff produced a report today that gave us a snapshot over the last 2 billing cycles of the number of city customers that are using water in excess of their target. Basically, roughly 25% of our customers are using water in excess of their current allocation. And you can, wrong button, wrong controller. This column basically gives you the amount of the overage. This is the number of accounts in each of those areas or amounts of overage. And the total at the bottom, 100% is 100% of this 25. So understand that this, for instance, the 20.9 isn't 20.9% of our customers, it's 20.9% of the 25. And the total units of water used over these 2 billing periods is roughly 9.3 million gallons or 28.5 acre feet. That is roughly equivalent to the amount of water used by 56 single-family dwellings. So that gives you an idea of the amount of water that's being used in addition to conservation targets.
Chairman, what time period is that?
That was basically the last 2 billing periods, which would be basically the last 4 months. Okay, another recommendation of the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Commission, and one of the things that was specifically directed by the council for the commission to review is the returning the flow restrictor provision to the Water Conservation Ordinance. This was something that was included in the original ordinance. It is something that is used currently in Glendale, Azusa, Pasadena, Covina, South Pasadena, and elsewhere. And the idea behind it, as expressed by the commission, is that there was a feeling that there are some customers that will pay whatever it costs to use however much water they want to use, and it was felt that this would be a deterrent to those folks that didn't mind spending the money and just using the additional water. Moving on then to the state restrictions. Again, these are the restrictions that are, we can address these with the administrative citation process. To date, we have sent out 760 or more courtesy letters. Over 100 of those letters were to repeat violators. Some violators got 3 or more of those letters, and the violations continue. The commission felt that there's been an adequate notification period to date. We've been after this basically since July, keeping people aware of this. It's been publicized well, and the commission felt that there was really no reason to continue to waive penalties at this point. There were some other recommendations that staff wanted to add to the mix as we're looking at the water conservation ordinance. One of those was to require that individual water meters be installed on all new multifamily residential developments. If someone comes in to build condominiums at some point after the moratorium is lifted, we feel that it would be appropriate to have an individual water meter for each one of those units. Likewise, for a new apartment building, this would allow landlords to identify who it is in their facility that is wasting water. It would also enable tenants to be billed directly for water, and it also allows for independent billing or tracking of irrigation water use. And finally, staff would recommend, as I noted earlier, adding the water budget estimating tool to the city's website. Putting that calculator on the website would allow customers not only to estimate what their water use should be, but they could also use this to estimate what their water use savings could be if they change some of their landscaping to drought tolerance. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah.
I have just a general question. I haven't really been following the state water department's projections about water use in the state for this 2015. I know that January was dry. Are they, because we just had some rain up in the north this week. What can you tell us about that, or what does it look like?
The articles that were posted today on the DWR website were basically saying, in unison, saying that yes, we've gotten some rain. Yes, we have gotten some increase in the snowpack, but it is still well below where it needs to be. So, again, Metropolitan is looking at possibly rationing water beginning July 1st. Superintendent Reynoso and Deputy Director, actually, sorry, we promoted Jose. Deputy Directors Semino and Reynoso both attended a conference on groundwater yesterday and today, and they heard comments from Metropolitan Water District that it may not be as bad as it's being publicized. So we're getting two different stories, and staff is continuing to be as conservative as we can, and much as we hate to do so, looking at the downside rather than going with Metropolitan statements today that they may be issuing higher allocations than this year.
It's true we have about maybe a month and a half, 2 months left in the rainy season.
Yep.
So we could get some good news here.
Could still get some rain.
question with respect to the audits for, water audits for the appeals. Is the idea that the step one for staff recommendations is if step one is not to the liking of the appealer, then it would go to step two, so it would just be progressive?
Right, yeah, it would be progressive, cumulative kind of an effort, yes.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question on your spreadsheet tool. If you can put that up again, if you wouldn't mind, just put it on the screen.
Pieces falling apart here, okay. Okay, next one?
No, the next one, yeah. Okay, so, or is it the one before that? Just right before that? Yeah, okay. So the indoor use allocation at the top of the page there is
Yes.
55 gallons per day.
Correct.
That doesn't necessarily represent a conservation stretch target.
Correct. And the base, when we get to the bottom of the sheet here, when we're talking about the summer base cycle of that 32 units, that is not necessarily a conservation number. Notice we are multiplying that by 0.7 to reduce it by 30%. So what we're looking at up above
Yeah.
is not necessarily conservation numbers. It's basically an indication of status quo on the property.
Yes. Okay, well, my reading of it was a number like that, 55 gallons per day. That is kind of sort of the low end of what is considered normal for new construction, where a house has all the modern recommendations. Is that correct?
I believe so. And these are essentially, these are nationwide numbers. These are not specific to California. I've
Yes.
confirmed with Jose, these are nationwide
Okay.
factors that we're using.
Right, okay, but there was a document, I sent it to the city manager today, I was reading it, and I think, different water districts use different numbers for doing this sort of a calculation. So again, from my reading, it was explicit to say that others like in Orange County, the low end would be 55 and the higher end would be as high as 65, I think. But on average, it's 55 to 60 is what a normal allocation is. And that, my understanding, is based on modern, state-of-the-art building requirements that are in place today. And they showed charts that showed how the average daily consumption has dropped dramatically from houses built in the 50s and 60s to what we have today. So I think the 55 in itself would kind of be a stretch target for somebody living in an older house. So, I mean, to achieve 55, you'd have to have all the modern shower heads, toilets, washing machines, things like that. And then you might have to just be very conscious about what you're doing. And that could be a challenge if you're living in an older home. And I know that's what we get into with the audits and things like that. So now, if you then reduce that by 30%, I'm just wondering, is that really a fair kind of a number? Or should we start with a higher number than 55? Or keep the 55 and reduce the 30% a little bit? Because I think to expect that you are already at state of the art and then reduce 30% below that might be a lot to ask. So I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe we can save that for discussion, but
We can certainly, whatever the council's pleasure is, we can certainly change that number in any way you'd like to change it.
Okay.
This is just the information that I had going in from the research that I did. I didn't have the document that you're referring to, so by all means, we could change it to 65 or anywhere in between. That's
Okay.
perfectly up to the council.
The same would go for the turf. Like I just looked at turf and, I understand the calculation, but the PF, what does PF stand for again?
Plant factor?
Plant factor. Okay, so what I read in this document that's for the state of California is that the plant factor for California for grass is about 0.8. So, 0.7 would be good because then we're saying that that's, less water that we're allowing. But the point is that that's very close to a normal situation, but then you put the 30% on top of it there. So we can maybe talk through this as far as if we're going to do this, what kind of numbers we might want to put in there, because asking 30% on top of all this might be a bit of a stretch. So I'm not sure. I'm looking forward to the discussion on it, but this is just my own opinion from reading these kinds of documents,
Yeah, it's a great point, a lot of which I have no knowledge of, so this is,
Yeah.
I mean, the document that you sent, we got right before the council meeting, I didn't get
Yeah.
to read, so.
It was interesting.
I wish I'd have read it 2 days ago and you
Right.
had a lot sooner, but I only
No.
saw it, this afternoon.
No, I think it's great.
I do have a question, if
Please.
I might. Director Inman. So I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around all these formulas and the allotment and the conservation. So I did ask that you run my home, what
Run
we
my
currently have.
I
And
did. I did.
then I asked
mine
you to
too.
run it through the calculator to see if there was any difference. Now, just to explain, we live in my husband and I, and 4 animals, we live in a townhome. So we have no yard. We have a little patch, it's not turf, and we don't change any of our water habits, summer or winter. So we use the same amount all the time. So when you do the calculation, what I currently am allotted, I'm allowed 16 units in the summer and 15 units in the winter. Now, when you go through the calculator and through all of this, I go down to 16 units in the summer, which is the same, but then it goes down to 11 units in the winter. I don't have any property, so that's one of the issues that I'm kind of having. It doesn't seem like we're getting an equitable way to calculate people's usage. And I'm just one example.
So how do you explain that, Mr. Inman?
The difficulty I have with a townhouse project is I had to evaluate the entire property, all 4. So I calculate the entire building size, and there are patches of grass there, and a mixture, there's flowers in some areas of the property, and
But the-
again, when I do this is my frame of reference from sitting in an office is aerial photography and Google Streets. So it's not the level of detail that I would be able to offer if I had a staff member going out there and doing the boots on the ground kind of a thing. This is, no pun intended, this is the 10,000 foot level of an evaluation.
But-
And that's as close as I
But
can
our
get.
property, the property has a separate meter that goes to our homeowners. So that has a separate meter. It's not included in any of our individual ones. So you shouldn't even be looking at any of that property, just the individual townhomes, which
Well,
have
in
very
in
little.
that case, then you would be limited to just the indoor use.
Right,
So you
which
would
is
get-
more. So I would like the indoor use, because it's 16 units all year. So that's, yeah, see, I mean, there's just,
Again, there's,
yeah.
any
No, but you
tool
have
like
to
this is
subtract
going to
out
have
the-
some shortcomings when I'm sitting at a remote location trying to interpolate and look at data from aerial photos, which may not even be the most up-to-date photos.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to the discussion because I think there's ways to mitigate that.
I had a question, Director Inman, on the state restrictions on watering, and I know we've said that we've done a good job of informing folks. How have we informed folks? Just for my edification, have we put,
I have that.
all right.
We have done a lot. I have a highlighted list of many items. There's been a number of press releases, at a minimum of 4 and even more. It's been on a numerous Facebook postings, numerous e-blasts. We did it's all sort of lumped in together, but the whole water conservation and the targets, there have been 2 mailers, as you're aware, to all of our water customers. There were banners over Baldwin. We have been attending events like a booth at the National Night Out. We had water conservation bookmarks, got things out that way. So there have been quite a few things that we've done to get the word out.
Yeah, and those I did see the banner. I've seen a lot of those things that you'd mentioned. Do they all specifically talk about the days on which residents can water? My main concern is that,
The press releases do, the
press releases do. Okay.
e-blasts, Facebook postings do, information going to our website does.
Mhm.
The 700 letters that Director Inman referenced, those are sort of personalized to the
Right.
person. That includes the information, and, you know, we still have repeat
Yeah.
folks doing it. So yes, it does include the detailed
Yeah,
information.
I guess my main concern is still that aspect of it, that folks are still watering on the wrong days. So that was a question I had. And then, secondly, on the overage there, Director Inman, and it was slide, I don't know which slide it was, but it showed the percentage and kind of the, here it is. Yeah, it's 9 on here. I thought that this was going to show something different, which was most of the usage in terms of units coming from the real egregious users, the 150 and above, right? The 200 plus, and that's
Only two.
egregious, and that's only 2. But you do see that there's a fair amount of folks right there at the bottom that are just using anywhere from 1 to 20, which is good and bad, right? I mean, they're over, so they're violating, but in terms of transferring to acre feet, it's very little of an impact on us. So, how do you interpret this data? In some ways it's encouraging, in some ways it's not. There's more people than we'd like to see, 25% over their allotments, but it does seem like there's some people that are just getting it wrong, or 10 or so units over. Were you expecting that data, or were you? I wasn't. So, I mean, what's your impression of this?
I just received it today, so
I actually
really
prepared
haven't-
this, so
Yes,
I
you
would
did.
probably be the best
Okay.
one. I actually prepared this. I thought it would be helpful.
It is. It's very
For the
helpful.
council to know, how are our customers doing in meeting their targets? I agree with you. The good news is 75%, you turn the numbers around, 75% of our water users are at or below their target, which I think is phenomenal. So this is an issue with 25% of our customers, and I thought it might be helpful to see where those 25% fall. And you're correct, it's really not, there really aren't a lot of egregious, there's very few. The vast, the 50%, 30, 40, 50,
Almost 70, yeah.
is underneath 20 units, between one unit over and 20 units over. And
It's interesting.
again, I would say that is probably definitely positive, because it shows people are trying. Otherwise, we would probably see a lot more in the, much higher numbers if people weren't paying attention to it at all.
If you broke the data down a little differently, and, and showed how many people are exceeding, say, by the target they have. See, in other words, like 1 to 4, you could have somebody with an allocation of 50 that's exceeding it by 2. And I think that tells you a different story from somebody that's got an allocation of 15 that's exceeding it by 2. So if we looked at it differently that way, I think that would be very interesting to help us also. Because, I mean, it's not surprising to me that you'd have a lot of people stacked up at the bottom because they're just barely exceeding their targets. So, what could be with this too, what we don't know, is how many people in this would qualify for an adjustment using the tool. I mean, a lot of these lower ones could drop off on that. We don't know,
Right.
unless we look at the data differently,
Yep.
So this won't tell you that. But what this just does tell me is that there's a lot of people that are, just for whatever reason, exceeding by a large portion, when the bulk of the community seems to be doing what it needs to do to deal with the problem that we have. So,
Sorry, go ahead.
Up, those that are using over, the 30 to the 200 plus, they're using more water than all of those at the bottom.
So
Right.
you people are
You know.
using a lot of the
Yep.
water. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not fair.
that's not fair.
Any other questions for Director Inman, or any other questions on the staff report before we open up for public comment? Thank you, Director Inman. We'll open this up for public comment, questions.
My name's Bud Switzer. I live on Allegria. If we're below our quota in units, can we carry the number of units that are below over to another period when we might be over? Can we carry over units?
Yeah,
if we're
no,
under?
it's a good question. It's been asked before. I think the answer is no, that we don't do
have the
that.
mechanism, the ability to track that and do
Right.
that. And the goal, remember, is to get under 30% citywide, so if you start giving credits back, we're not gonna hit the 30%.
Oh. And you're not the first person that has asked that question. We get that question a lot. You know, if, you know, in the winter, if you're saving up those units and you're not using them, why can't I use them during the summer?
Dang.
Then we're all
Black
using more
victory.
water.
Now, I have another question. You said the PF was for plants, plant factor, and you mentioned grass. Now, how about trees, like orange trees? Do I get a little higher factor for orange trees? Grapefruit trees?
There is a different factor
Yeah,
for trees
this is
and,
0.6.
and shrubs and flowers and grass.
Also, the number of trees?
It's based upon the area that the trees occupy.
What do you mean, the trunk or the whole
The-
shade?
The general area, I mean, it's a rough estimate,
I would assume it's the shade if you're doing an aerial. Yeah.
Maybe the, yeah.
not just the trunk.
You know, if you
The
look at my
crown.
lot, it's completely covered with trees.
Well,
Yeah, need
that
more
would make
water.
it an easy calculation then.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Debbie Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive. I would like to second what Heather Allen said at the last meeting and also tonight. We absolutely do need to conserve water, and we all know that. But whatever the criteria are to allot the water usage really remains a mystery, and I know you've taken past accounts of what we've done. It seems like, and you've brought this up this evening, and I commend you for it, that those of us who have been conserving are the ones who seem to be dinged for this. And I would like you to know that I too have been quizzing fellow residents. One of my friends told me today that her target number was 35. 35 just seems so high to me. Her house is smaller than mine, her lot is smaller than mine. There are 2 retired people who live there, and she said they actually made an effort, they have been making efforts to conserve, and last month what they actually used was 9. Now how can they have 35 as a target number and only use 9? My allotted number is 12, and now I am very jealous of you, Councilmember Delmar, for your 16. I have 3/4 of an acre, and I have 2,500 square feet in my house. And I get a magic number of 12. And I would also like to point out, as Director Inman said, my water stinks still, and it's discolored. Last night, all I wanted to do was make some spaghetti, but I didn't want to make it in this horrible colored water, so I had to let my tap run. And I don't want to use bottled water because my dog and I go through it like crazy. And so if you are going to impose penalties, what I'm asking is that you do it fairly and not penalize those of us who have been conserving from the very beginning of this crisis. But I do have a couple of questions too, because I think you're on the right track right now, but my questions are, number of people in the household, how is that determined? I seem to have people coming and going all the time, adult children and various relatives that move back in from time to time. And secondly, I'd really like to know about the percentages of yards, your yard and your turf and your trees. Does that include the part of the yard that has already died and the trees that are dead, like my fig tree and my orange tree? Because I haven't been watering, I've been trying to conserve. And I thank you very, very much, and as I said, I think you're on the right track. Thank you. And please, get me more than 12 water.
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah.
Hello, Heather on Grove again. As I mentioned earlier, our target numbers are 14 for the summer and 12 for the winter. And I did want to thank the city for sending us a letter, an apology letter, right after the meeting we had 2 weeks ago. I am one of the 71 appellants. And I also wanted to thank Mr. Inman because he did call us in a very timely manner and spoke to us the next day after the meeting. I wanted to relate some concerns I had, though. Mr. Inman told my mother that he couldn't offer us any higher numbers at the time of that telephone call, but if we waited until the council meeting, which is happening tonight, he could give us higher numbers, 32 for the summer and 15 for the winter. He said that we must comply to a home inspection if the council approved it, and he did explain that the council can rewrite the amendment or approve it or reject it. In his words, we, meaning the staff, we answer to the council. So my question is, by whose authority does the city really have the right to enact this amendment before it's even been voted into law? I mean, Mr. Inman said, we answer to the council, but it kind of looks like the opposite might be true. My feeling is, why should we have to wait any longer for a final decision? You know, we've waited 4.5 months already. This is being delayed. And at the last city council meeting, the city manager told us that in the meantime, we can look at the historical, relook at the numbers, use the formula. We can do that now. We don't have to wait for the council to make a decision. So, Mr. Inman told my mother over the phone that he had the following years of 2003, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So my mother offered to show him our water bills, but I guess he wasn't interested. I'm concerned that as I sit here watching this meeting, the criteria for determining unit allotment is changing right before our eyes. We, the Allens, were promised that the city would look at our historical usage. If you look at the last paragraph of tonight's staff report, it appears that there are new methods listed. You heard some of that earlier this evening. The data from the assessor's office, the Google Earth, the city's GIS aerial photos, but I noticed there's no mention of historical data included in that paragraph. I don't think the city has the right to just change the criteria midstream. My neighbors' target numbers were based on their usage. Why aren't ours? I mean, what right did the city have to hold on to those 71 appeals until this amendment is being voted upon? Those applications should have been processed in a timely manner. None of us should be forced to comply to a home inspection or anything else that you might vote in tonight. I remember during the demolition moratorium discussion we had, special considerations were given to the current applicants. Well, how is this situation any different? Shouldn't we be grandfathered in? Finally, I think it's really too bad that the City Council voted to change the base year back in 2013. It used to be 2007 to 2008. That used to be the base year, and the minimum number of units was 17. I think a lot of people would agree that 17 would be a lot more reasonable than 12 as a base. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Colleen Allen on Grove. Very simply, I'd like to say, please put a sunset clause on this amendment. We may not need these modifications when the rain returns. I'm optimistic. I also question by whose authority did the staff have to hold back these 71 applications. They should have been handled in a timely manner, not held back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry Gold, 441 Ramona Avenue, Good evening, Mayor Herbury and council members. I'm so confused, I'm getting a headache from what I just saw. These spreadsheets and everything, it's just too complicated. And another thing I don't understand is, on my water bill, there's a target number. Let's just say it's 10 for round numbers. Is that what I'm supposed to use, or am I supposed to use 30% less than that and try to get to 7? I'm not sure. Or is my allotment more than 10, but when you take the 30% reduction, it becomes 10? So if anybody know, can anybody tell me? That would be helpful.
We can tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever I'm supposed to use, okay, if you do decide to impose penalties, and I don't think tonight you can make that decision because there's just too many things you need to find out before you can decide on something like this. But if you do decide to impose penalties, I would suggest that initially you only do it to people who, whatever their target number is, use more than that. And don't penalize people who are supposed to, we're all supposed to reduce by 30%. Don't penalize people who could only reduce by 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, but just start out by those people who are using even more than their target level. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to answer his question?
Yeah.
Leslie Hinton on Acacia. This is just an observation I've made at our house. In October, we had about 1,500 square feet of our front yard taken out, completely landscaped. All new plants, a lot of DG in there, but the plants need to get established. We've already lost some of the new plants by trying to keep back on the water. So I was going to go down and look at the water meter to see how we were doing. Well, the part of the water meter, the case that I used to be able to stick my finger in and pull it out, there's no way I can get that out now. It's real thick. So there's no way I can even monitor how much water we're using. So that was all I had to say is, how can I now check the water meter?
Thank you. We can address that. We've heard that before too. So, any other questions before we answer some of these? Okay. Well, let's take them in order. To Ms. Sheridan's question about whether the tree area or the grass area would include the dead areas. So, if someone has a dead lawn or a dead tree, is that still considered square footage for lawn and
Yes.
tree?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's just based on the square footage of what's there, whether they're watering, for the calculation, whether they're watering or not, isn't a factor in the basic calculation.
Okay. To Mr. Gold's question about the target number, does that include the 30% reduction?
Correct. The target number on individuals' bills, I think he gave the example of 10, that is the amount of water that residents can use to be at or under their target. That's the number is 10. Anything over that would be in excess of their target, 11, 12, 13.
So to answer the question, the 10 incorporates the 30%.
The 10 incorporates,
reduction.
the 10 includes their reduction, correct?
So the 30% is taken into account, and so if you use the 10, like Mr. Gold said, then you have reached your 30% conservation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And to Ms. Hinton's question, we had heard this from a young lady a few meetings ago. Some of the tops on the water meters now are heavy concrete, or I don't know what it's made out of, but it's heavy enough to where people are having problems lifting it up. I don't know if Deputy Director Semino or Reynoso have an easy fix for this. Is it just is it seriously like you have to use a crowbar to do it? Because that's what we'd heard before, that you need something like a metal rod with leverage to get it open.
Evening, Council and Mayor. Typically, a screwdriver can be inserted, and you can use that to leverage the lid. What we've been tasked with is to try to read all the water meters for the billing cycle in one day. As you know, for the past few years, we've been installing smart meters. These smart meters have the capability to be touch read. And when we touch read meters, it speeds up the process, so that allows us to read the meters all in one day. We designated a couple of routes in the system and converted them to touch read so that we can try to meet that goal. So that's the reason why you see some of the meters that have those heavier lids. But sticking a screwdriver in the axe or in the lid, and that will allow you to leverage it. The only thing that we ask if residents do that is to be careful, because there is a wire attached to the register, to the touchpad, that could be damaged if it's closed and the wire is not carefully put back in the meter box.
So there's not a real easy way to monitor water use in real time for the user unless we get something online that they could log on to on the internet and see.
Yes.
Which we are working towards.
And the meters also do have that capability. But there's an additional, we've talked about installing a radio that would transmit the signal out to the cloud where the resident would be able to.
Yeah, I think that's the goal eventually, just everyone could track it online. Thank you for that.
There were a couple other questions.
I was wanting to address, the other two I heard were why we didn't process the
Of
appeals.
course,
And
yeah.
then secondly, the historical review, I'll start with the historical review, that's that's easier to answer first. The historical review really doesn't refer to somebody's water use going back 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The historical review refers to going back to the specific period of time that our ordinance says our winter and summer numbers are calculated from. And staff did do that. So the first thing is to look to make, because it's 2013 numbers, to make sure that the basic math was correct. That's the historical review, is going back to those bills for that period of time in 2013 to make sure that we picked up the correct numbers in establishing the summer and winter quarters, and that was done. That is what's meant by the historical review. The second thing was the 71 appeals not being processed. The council made it very clear that A, we weren't imposing penalties, and B, this is something you wanted to discuss further. It was thought initially an education process, make everyone more aware of their water use, and at a certain point in time, we were going to be coming back to have this exact conversation. We would have felt it would have been more confusing to process those appeals, give all new numbers, the staff work, the residents' time, to only turn around a month later, 2, 3, 4 months later, and be going through it all over again.
Yeah.
And that was the reason that they were held till the council had this conversation. And we should have sent out letters earlier saying they were being held for that reason. And as a result of the last council meeting, we did send out those letters to let residents know. We were waiting for the council to have this discussion, so we wouldn't keep, you might recall when this was first implemented, a first set of letters went out with one target. That didn't work, and the next bunch of letters went out with different summer and winter targets. To have a third letter go out and then possibly a fourth, it just gets very confusing to the customers.
I would just want to add to that too, because, the discussion we had with the Allens when they were here last week is that nobody was really harmed by this. I mean, really the difference is that we suspended the penalties. That was the whole idea, is that we did not want to implement the penalties way back then. We could have done that, and then all these people that are on the graph that you showed would have been penalized by this. The other point I want to make, just to address a couple other questions, is that we are not changing the game here. The calculation for the conservation targets is not, there's no proposal on the table to change that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the other point is, I think Mr. Gold asked a question in a way to suggest that maybe we were talking about imposing penalties on those who are meeting their conservation targets. That's not the case at all. What we're here to discuss is exactly what you're saying, is that for those that are not meeting the targets, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to penalize them or not? And if we are, how much? That's what's on the table today. So I hope that helps clear up some of these.
I think Mr. Gold's point was a little bit different. I think
Okay.
his point was, don't penalize anyone who is not making their conservation target. Just penalize folks who are that aren't meeting their original target, not including the 30%. So let's say your original target was 14 and your reduced was 11. He's saying only penalize those that go over the 14. If folks are missing it by 12 or, That was, I think,
Okay,
his
the
point.
original target before, when we were at 20% conservation goal?
I think his point was just whatever your target is before, what, the original
hasn't-
target
it
would
It
be.
didn't change.
The original
hasn't-
target would be 20%, right?
When we first started down this path, people had either a 10% target or a 20% target, depending on what their water use was. There were targets sent out, that's the first set of letters we sent out. Residents either had a 10% target or a 20% target.
Okay, that was the first shot.
That was the first
Then
shot.
we redid it.
Then we redid it, and everyone now is at 30%.
Right, and that's what we have on the table today. So if you're
Still
meeting your
30%.
30%,
I
you're,
get, yeah, and I guess Mr. Gold's point was
Okay.
the original 10 or 20%.
well, we'd have to undo, we went
Yeah, I don't
to a
think-
30%
I don't think it'd be,
conservation.
yeah, I don't think it'd be administrative. I don't think we could do it now.
Right.
I don't think you can go back, so.
Well, and again, what basis would we have? I mean, the water situation has only gotten worse, not better. I don't know why we would even consider going back to a 20% rather than a 30%. That's
I can
not on
make
the
a-
table.
Just a point of order. Are we now discussing the issue, or I'm not quite sure what stage we're in here.
Well, unless, there's no more questions, so we are answering the questions, and yeah, we're at discussion, so. Okay. So I think that was his point.
Okay.
Do you have a comment, or you?
I'm waiting to hear kind of I'm an organized guy, I just want to
Okay.
see the official
Back to order.
discussion.
All right. Let's start with the formal comments.
Okay.
Anyone wants to start?
I'll start. I think for discussion purposes, it might be easier if we did as the staff recommended and the commission, that we look at the two different ones, the state mandates and then our own conservation allotments. And if we can agree, if we can do maybe the state mandates first and then go to the other one.
Good idea.
Well, and just so I understand too, though, but there are actually 4 recommendations that we're discussing tonight, right?
Yeah.
So, to start, you're recommending to start with the state? Okay.
Sure.
So make sure that's.
It's fine with me. Who wants to start with the state?
I'll
Yeah.
start. I think that, quite frankly, we have given people enough notice, enough warnings, and we still have 100 or so who blatantly disrespect the law. And yeah, I think we need to start imposing some fines on those people.
I agree with that. I feel like the city's done such a fantastic job of following that state mandated rule, and people are making real sacrifices to do it. On my street, we have many people who've lost shrubs, whole lawns are dry. Walking around town, I see this all over the place. But I also see water in the gutters, and I also see some very lush lawns, and there are lots of people who are still putting water on their lawns on the days they're not supposed to be. And I think at some point we have to stand up for the people who are minding the rules. And we also need to be mindful of the fact that the drought may go onward into the year, and the sooner we get hold of this problem, the better. So I agree with you, Councilmember Delmar.
When I was going through our packet here, this is the one area that, to me, there was no question that I think it's something that we should institute in terms of penalties. It was very apparent that with 763 initial violations, you have 109 that required additional letters. It shows and demonstrates that there has been communication, not only by these letters directly, but by all of the what the city manager had stated. So I am okay with enforcing the state restrictions with penalties.
I don't know what more we could have done to get the word out. So I'm in agreement with that, but I'd like to just put a little bit more backdrop on this. Again, the drought is getting worse. Yes, we're all praying for rain, but this recent statement by the MWD does have me concerned. And again, I just want to point out to everybody is that the contract we have to get that water from the MWD is for emergency purposes only. I just don't think it's prudent to rely on that for a long-term source of water. Our goal, is what we've said when we put the moratoriums on and in our general plan, is that we wish to get back to our traditional source of water. But as Director Inman pointed out in the graph, at the rate that the aquifer is recovering, we've got 24 more months before we can get back to a full allocation on this. So, I mean, I think we have to take this very, very seriously, and I really appreciate the 75% of the people that have made an effort and are complying with their conservation targets. So I think with that in mind, it's almost unconscionable to just keep avoiding allowing people to flaunt the law, as you point out, and not have any repercussions for it. So I really think we have to do it, and we have to keep this in mind as we discuss the other things as well. So yes, I'm in favor of what was suggested.
In the, in terms of ramping up enforcement of the state restrictions, I'm in favor of it too. I do think, and I'll continue saying this, I think that to the extent the state wants us to enforce it, they should be providing us resources to do that, though. I mean, I'm upset that this is something that we're supposed to be policing, and we're using our local resources to do it without no thought from our state government to give us any resources for it. So that's my, I think, ongoing protest. While I think this is a good thing, it is going to cut into our staff time, our public works folks who are going to, I assume it's public works, who are going to be going around and making sure, and to be clear, the state restrictions, this primarily, if not solely, relates to days of watering, whether you're using a hose, things like that on your, so that's human beings going around and essentially policing people's water use. And that takes a lot of manpower.
The Public Works Police, just to cut, Public Works, Police, and Code Enforcement.
Okay.
Any of those
So
bodies.
Yeah, well, what would you propose is, like Director Inman said, just driving around for, what did you say, an hour today? You notice how many violations? Well, you know, we don't want
We wouldn't have
24 by 7.
24/7
So-
enforcement. It's something we would schedule. We wouldn't publicize the schedule, but
Yeah.
it's something we would periodically have staff go out and do in different parts of town on different days.
Yeah, and you can then, when you do the water reports, tell us how many hours were
We can include
spent
that.
enforcing and what you found. And then maybe we can give suggestions as to we need to step up enforcement or back off or something like that, I suppose.
I just want to,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would imagine, though, you would start with the repeat offenders. I mean, you have a.
Well, we'd
set
have
group
to
of
see if they
people.
repeat a
Sure.
fourth or whatever
Sure,
this time.
but there's a red flag, so we have an idea. I wouldn't imagine that we're going every day and just kind of.
It won't be an everyday thing. You're right, we don't have the staff to do that. It'll be periodically.
And, neighbors can snitch on each other.
We have a phone, we have a hotline.
I mean,
We have a water
They can do
hotline.
it anonymously.
They can do it
and,
anonymously.
Sometimes it takes a village to get this to work, so.
But still, before anybody gets a violation, it has to be witnessed by,
The person writing the administrative
Right.
citation, correct.
yes,
Correct.
Yeah, so that's fine. Councilmember Gus, did you have a I just want people to know that, we are not something's not going to be getting done while, however many hours we spend a week, right? That person's going to be spent doing that and not something else, which concerns me, but I think it's something we have to do. So on number 4, I think it's unanimous that we want to enforce the state restrictions. Let's just work our way back, if that's okay. The water restrictor, we're at recommendation 4. The flow restrictor, comments, thoughts on that?
I'm still not in favor of that.
Yeah.
I just really think that's draconian, and even though other cities are doing it, I really have a hard time with that. And that is a huge burden even on staff to go out and do that and reconnect it. And I'd rather just first take a lighter approach, and maybe another time, it's always on, we can always put it back anytime if we feel it's necessary, but I'm just not in favor of that.
I'm not in favor of that either. However, with respect to the staff recommendations on the new multifamily residential development, again, I don't know if it's a separate.
That's a
Oh, yeah,
different.
it's different.
But,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
gonna
it's
take them one at a time.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, and I'd kind of like to keep the water flow in our back pocket if the drought gets
Yeah.
worse, and have that to pull out if we need to.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that is something we should be doing. Number 2 is require the residential water audit prior to consideration of an appeal of the customer's base year, and we did hear a little bit of concern about that because the water audit does ask questions about things in your household, whether you use water tolerant or water, newly refurbished water, sprinklers and shower heads and things like that. And what do we have? What do you guys think about requiring this for an appeal?
I'll go.
Well, I can go.
Go.
I have a couple problems with it, and the first is we have to think of what the audit we originally did for the audit was to be able to help our residents learn what conservation steps they can take, and they can request an audit, and we set up a fund for that, and it was like $8,000. So if we're going to start using this audit as a requirement in the appeal, somewhere we have to come up with some more money, because this $8,000 is going to go pretty quick. And it now appears that the audits are kind of punitive, and they're not the customer service that we were asking for before. And I would like to see the audit as the very last step that customers can go through, but also understand that audits are voluntary, and residents don't have to use them if they don't want to. But also note that it's been shown that, our low-flow toilets and our low-flow shower heads have greatly reduced the intake or the use of water in the home. So we do need to encourage that. But at this point, I would not like to use the audit as a punitive.
I agree with that. I just want to point out, this is on page 3 of 6, in your recommendation 2, and our code states, no relief shall be granted to any customer for any reason in the absence of a showing by the customer that he or she has achieved the maximum practical reduction in water consumption. So why would we force that on them? I mean, it's there for the customer as a benefit if perhaps they want some suggestions as to how they can make a better case to show that perhaps we should grant a waiver. So, I mean, I think the burden should just be totally on the customer to do that, I mean, this gets into how we could possibly use the water budget. And I would suggest that staff, if there's an appeal, staff does the rudimentary water budget and presents that to the customer as an alternative to the numbers that were given. If it's higher, that gives them some relief. If the customer isn't satisfied with that, then it becomes the customer's issue to show that that calculation was done wrong on the water budget. And they then either can choose to use our service that we provide, or they can hire their own consultant. And then when the data then is given to staff, then staff could look at it and make a further adjustment if it's called for. So I think just doing it that way solves basically all the issues. It gives a customer options. It takes care of the privacy issue, and it's not that difficult to administer. So I'd like to see it used in that way.
The key for me is voluntary
Yeah.
at that point, and that the customer has an opportunity to choose someone to do the audit, that this is not a government audit per se.
Right.
We should have it available for them to save the money, but they should have the right to be able to do it outside of our
Yeah.
purview.
The customer were doing the appeal, again, in case made by Ms. Sheraton there, if she's got somebody else living in her house, that may be enough to get her what she needs to meet her target without going through the audit. So, I mean, it's up to the customer, yeah.
Councilmember Arizmendi?
I don't think I really need to repeat anything. I think one of the biggest concerns I had with this was one, whether it was voluntary or required. And then 2 was the time and the resources that we'd have to put towards it. So the way that it's written here is not something that I am willing to support, but I'm looking forward to talking about the recommendations by staff and how we can alter this a bit.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. I don't think that,
If I could summarize, just to make sure staff is crystal clear on what the council would like.
well, let me,
Because
let me
we do
just,
need to.
can I,
Oh,
let me
okay,
jump in
I'm
and
sorry,
talk
I
first,
thought
and then we
you
can
were
do that.
agreeing. Okay.
I do think that these water audits are very good and are a good use of staff time to the extent that people want them. But I do think the concern about privacy, I think, is a fair one, although I don't want us to not inquire as to what people are doing. I think that we need to, as a city, make sure that everyone's doing everything they can to conserve water, right? And I think that to the extent someone is refusing to put in low-flow showers and sinks and stuff like that, I think that needs to be a consideration to the extent the appeal goes past what the Mayor Pro Tem was explaining, which is we give them the new formula. If they come back and say, this isn't good enough, I'm appealing again, I think that we have to consider whether we are going to institute a mandatory water audit.
I would suggest we deny the appeal at that point.
And maybe you do, and maybe you do, and you don't give
It's up
them.
to the customer.
It has to be up to
And
the
that,
customer.
maybe that's right. So, but you're essentially then saying that it's a mandatory, if you
No,
don't
No,
take.
no, because, look, I mean, I had a conversation with.
But how would you know if they didn't have the low-flow
You
toilets
don't,
and
you
things like
don't care. The city does not care. We gave you a conservation target based on your historical usage. We offer you an alternative using the water budget method with general assumptions because we don't have specific information about your property because you wish to not disclose that. So we give you that alternative. If that alternative comes back with a higher number, you can accept that or not. If you're still not satisfied that it's enough, then you, the customer, have to do just what is written here, is you have to show.
But how are they going to do that, I guess?
Well, I really don't think we need to dive that deep into the weeds. The burden is on the customer to show that they can't. If they are unwilling to show conclusively that they have a need, then they're going to have to accept it and pay the fine.
I guess I understand where we're coming from. I'm more worried about staff interpreting now what this means. So if I'm a staff member and I see that the code says, the ordinance says, of a showing by the customer that he or she has achieved the maximum practical reduction in water consumption, how are they supposed to interpret that without being able to go through a checklist?
When we did this before, when we discussed this before, well,
We should strike it, because we're not going to be able to enforce it.
here's my thought on it. When we discussed this the first time, if I remember correctly, we gave broad latitude to our public works staff to interpret this. And, our thinking, I know my thinking at the time was they were going to be very reasonable in how they apply it.
I guess, yeah, and I would just like to hear from staff then, without the ability to ask questions like, are you using low drip, sprinklers? Are you using low flow toilets? Without be able to ask those questions, how were you, and Director Inman or Deputy Director Reynoso, how are you going to figure out whether the customer has achieved the maximum practical reduction?
We couldn't.
You can't do it, right? I mean,
But I want to clarify, but we don't have to be the ones asking the questions. We don't have to be the ones doing the survey. If I can understand what the Mayor Pro Tem is saying, it is completely up to the resident on whether or not the resident wants to take it the next step, which is securing, either doing it free through us or securing their own certified. There is a certification required to do this work. Because we would, I'd like to say we'd be able to take somebody's word if they just came to us and said, everything's been retrofit.
Right.
That wouldn't be fair to everyone else who is following the rules. It would be totally voluntary for the resident to decide, we do the audit, or they secure their own.
Right.
Or they accept whatever the budget or what they originally given, whatever's the best number for them at that. Through the first two processes.
So it's then it's a de facto, they have to do it, or.
Well, no, they don't have to. That's why I say they don't have to.
Then-
They could accept,
So let's go back
let's
to
say
that
the water
hypothetical.
budget.
Let's go back to the hypothetical where they don't do it. Under what circumstances would you be able to make the finding that they are doing everything that they can to achieve the maximum practical reduction.
If either A, we do, proof, either A, we do the audit, or they provide, they give us a copy of audit that was done.
Quick question,
They had done.
quick question.
So in other words, we'll just finish this. An audit has to be done to make that finding.
No.
No.
Then please explain to me, how do you make that finding without
Here-
an audit
I
being done?
want to explain.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm just reading the code. It says, in the absence of a showing by the customer. The customer can show any way they want.
How would you do it?
I don't know.
But here's
I
why
don't
we
know.
need to worry as council members, as policymakers, because we are telling staff to go out and enforce this. If we cannot understand how they're going to enforce that on a practical
Mayor,
matter,
I
then
understand what the mayor's
then
saying.
I do
we
too.
need to have some direction here for staff. Staff, I'm seeing staff shake their heads at saying, I would have no idea how to enforce this without either having them do their own audit or we do the audit.
Mr. Mayor, I think, again, I just want to say, it says, in the absence of a showing. If there is an absence of a showing, the staff has no choice but to deny.
Right.
But-
So let's think
but
about
Mayor
when.
Pro Tem, let me see if I can explain that. He's not talking about the ordinance. He's looking at what the EENR recommended was that no relief shall be granted. He's looking at that little part. And.
No, it's part, but it is part of the ordinance.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
and
part
we
of the
do have to strike that.
Well, yeah, I agree.
Because if you're doing a 3 steps, because now we're doing 3 steps, right? They
So
have their
we-
target,
we haven't
they're gonna
got-
do their water budget, and then they can do an audit. So they can be given relief if the water budget comes out that they get higher target numbers. So they can be given that relief.
They can, and they can also
Right,
tell you, here
right.
is proof that I have another person living here. That may give them some. That may cause them to be okay with it. We don't have to enforce that they
Yeah, but-
do the audit.
I
I'd
agree
like
with the
to
mayor,
know-
you
I'd-
have to take that out.
I'd like to get, maybe from staff, if we have audits, optional audits that people can choose to have done by someone besides the city, there must be some kind of industry or professional standard that all the audits would employ.
Yes.
Would we insisting that that would be commensurate with our audit? Or are we talking about apples and oranges here?
No, there is a professional certification.
Okay, so if somebody goes out and has their own audit, and they come in and the audit says that they have maxed out on their water conservation, the specifics of how they've done that may not be in that report. Would that be possible?
I don't know.
Couldn't they give you
To
a
ask somebody
generalized
who's-
report without the
who's
specifics?
certified. I don't know.
I
We
think
do
we're-
actually have somebody here who is certified to
I think we're all
do these.
agreed that we don't want to have a mandatory audit, so we just need to
Right.
take that out.
And I thought the conversation was we were going to look at how the recommendations were put here and then go through what the recommendations are from staff, taking it separately.
We are.
We want
but
the
this
staff
is-
to
this
have
is-
good
To me, this is still.
Standalone issue.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a long way of saying, how are we going to determine whether someone is, at their maximum practical reduction in water without either them doing some sort of audit or us going in and doing an audit? And I don't know if we've answered that question, but.
So the American Water Works Association, California, Nevada section is the one that sets the guidelines for water conservation practitioners and for audits. And they have a certification process. And what we would recommend that any outside agency that does a water audit meet the minimum guidelines and certification of the American Water Works Association so that it could, in case we do it, it's comparing apples to apples.
And what would that include?
Typical audit includes analyzing the irrigation system, checking to make sure that all the fixtures are low-flow fixtures, that the toilets are ultra-low flush toilets. Anywhere that fixtures or irrigation systems could be updated, they would have to show how much water could be saved by updating those fixtures. Typically in the water audit, it would show what the current use is, and after all the water conservation features and fixtures are installed, what the savings would be.
Right, and that's I guess what I suspected, right? So, I guess my point then, and that confirms it, is we don't want to give people false hope, okay? We don't want people to say, oh, well, I don't necessarily have to do the audit, but I can still have this appeal after the initial conversation with staff where we do the calculations. If they want to come back and appeal again, what we're saying tonight really is, oh, well, you don't have to do a mandatory appeal. but it's make-believe because the only way that they can make a showing that they've achieved maximum practical reduction is that you'd have to go through the audit. You know, you'd have to go and make those findings, and you'd have to show staff that you did all these things. Because otherwise, we can't just say, staff, you know, you guys can interpret what you think when our deputy director and director are going to go back and they're going to apply the standards that we would have, you know, what we would have applied through the audits. And I guess that's my worry about tonight saying, well, we're not going to require audits, but then also requiring this showing to be made by customers. I think they're in contention. So either we strike this, or we tell folks that, well, this is what you would have to do to make the showing. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. In the absence of the showing, it's denied. So if the customer doesn't do what they need to do to show it, it would be denied. But I don't want customers, because what I can foresee is customers walking in now and saying, well, I know that I don't have to do the audit, but I still want to show you how I'm at maximal practical reduction. And then it's going to be this, you know, staff and the customer staring at each other just like no one knows what's going on.
I think the reason I delineated between two things. This says conservation certified staff, and then the way that it's recommended by staff is you have two choices. You can either have the staff come in, or you have a certified person. So the mandatory part was, I don't want to have staff, it shouldn't be mandatory for staff to conduct the audit.
I agree.
So that's why I was saying, if we start talking about the staff recommendations, to have the other option is, I think it covers that, but it's misleading when we're seeing it's mandatory conservation from certified staff.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't.
Well, yeah, but
It's a
we
good
all
point.
understand it
Yeah.
the same way. It's just that maybe we didn't articulate it the same way.
Yeah, no, I understood it. Either staff does it or you hire your own.
But I'm still concerned about that says no relief shall be given, because at the time of that, we didn't have this water budget tool. So now we have the water budget tool. So if a person appeals, and this is only when people want to look at their target numbers, and a person appeals and they go through the water budget tool and they're still not satisfied with those, and they want to go even further,
That's my
then they can choose to have, to go the next step.
Right. And that was my point.
Yeah, and if they choose to go to the next step, then there is going to be an audit done, and it's either going to be by our staff, or they're going to have a certified staff.
That was precisely my point.
Right.
That was exactly right.
And that's why when we asked the question to Director Inman, it's progressive, so I think we
Yeah.
are with the
But I
same
don't know if the Mayor Pro Tem necessarily thought that
Okay.
that was right. And if,
Well, you're right. I mean, when it comes right down to it, because of the language
Right.
that we have here that's in our code right now, you're right. How would you show that you have achieved the maximum practical reduction in water consumption without an audit?
I don't know. And that was
I
my,
don't- I
that
don't
was
know
my
how you
struggle.
do that either. So,
I guess if it, you know, for the folks out there, if you do get past the initial appeal and then you want to come back, for the folks that are worried about privacy, which I don't marginalize that concern at all, an audit has to be done either by you or the city, if you still have concerns.
And can I add one thing? I think a lot of people, do worry about the privacy, and that's understandable, but also the people that are coming in to do the inspection are only coming in to look at your water things. They're not out there, they're not trained, they don't know if you violated any other codes, so you don't need to be fearful of that. They're just going to come and look at those specific things that are on the water audit to make sure that everybody's doing everything that they can if they want to increase their target number.
do we need to, if we were to go that route, would we need some language to maybe explicitly say that city staff is forbidden to use the audit for any other purpose other than looking at, I mean, do we need to do that? I don't know.
Right, can they report
I will-
other?
Like code
I would-
violations?
Right, exactly.
You can't do that, or,
I would caution against, and City Attorney could chime in, against a blatant blanket statement like that, because what if something really egregious, really awful is noted?
yeah.
Some abuse of some sort. So I can tell you that staff is reasonable, they're not, going to be,
Yeah.
if, there's a closed-off door and there's no water fixture in there, we're not
Yeah.
gonna see that there's a fourth bedroom that was built without permits. They won't have that information, they won't have building permit information.
they
When they
won't
go
know.
out there, they won't know what was built with permits and what wasn't.
Mr.
But-
Mayor, but I want to just back to the point where maybe there is a creative way that somebody could show it, so I don't want to nail it down to say that the audit must be done.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think we need to add that. I wanted to clarify that essentially de facto, that's probably going to be the case.
Maybe unless they're somebody, we're
Yeah.
not experts.
No, we're not.
And we have limited experience so far in doing this. Now,
Yeah.
maybe there's another way to show staff that they have done this without an audit. Maybe. So
Yeah.
why don't we just leave it at that?
Because, we can do that. I just don't want people to be shocked and horrified when we hand them the, the list and we say, we have to do, I just don't want people to be under a misunderstanding.
Again, I hate to just sound callous here, but remember, 75% of the people are meeting their number.
agree.
And there's a lot of people that are meeting it by far, as Ms. Sheridan pointed out with her neighbor, went from 35 to 9.
But you can certainly say, my in-laws are now moved in, so we've gone from 2 to 4.
You could say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, but that's a good point, because if you do that, that in itself is enough to give you perhaps,
A bump up.
with
on
using the
your
tool,
units. Yeah.
using the tool.
And you're absolutely right. There's no way to find out what's going on inside the house unless we do an audit to find out when the toilet was manufactured. Toilets
Yeah.
after a certain day are low flow, 1.6 gallons per flush. The newer
Yeah.
toilets are 1.3, to make sure that the customers have their aerators, that they have their flow restrictors and their aerators. And the only other option that we have is if somebody appeals, that we can install a data logger on the meter, or we could put a radio meter there that tracks the use, and we can see that they're irrigating on the right days of the week, that they're irrigating at the right times.
Go there.
But that's the only other.
No, there is one more thing. Maybe this language can be improved, because if we allow, if you give the person the tool, you did the calculation on the tool based on, I don't know what we're going to use, we haven't talked about that, but say we use the average of Sierra Madre 2.4 per household, and that's the number you plug into the tool, and they come back and say, I have 4 people living here, and I'm willing to show you evidence of that, then you could say, all right, I'm going to give you more, and,
Based on per capita use.
yeah.
City attorney has something to.
The procedure in the ordinance is already set up that way. There's actually 2 different kinds of appeals, if you will. The first is just an office conference with the superintendent. And that's when the tool gets used. You can say, but I have more people living it. I mean, you can make all those arguments, and you're never getting to the level of special evidence that you would go to for the appeal. So the concerns about, well, if we're just using the tool, do we need to change the ordinance? You don't need to change it, because the ordinance is already drafted that way. It's only if you're not satisfied after the tool's been used and you want to push it to the next level.
Okay.
After the office conference.
Which, that's how I
That's,
understand it.
that's the appeal. That's a little more formal. And at that point, as Mayor Pro Tem points out, it really is on the customer. It's their burden. We can, if you feel more comfortable, we can suggest in the ordinance such as a water audit, but you wouldn't necessarily want to limit them to that. And the factors that staff would use to see if the customer has, the factors are there already in the ordinance, the things that you're looking for. And the only issue is, what's the customer doing to prove that they've met these additional factors? And really, when it comes right down to it, you really are looking at the end of the day, well, what kind of fixtures are you using? Are you using low-flow fixtures? Is your irrigation a drip system? What types of things have you done? And you would, I mean, maybe we could have a handout sheet with check the boxes off for them to take back and do their own audit, or take to somebody to pay for. But at the end of the day, well, true. No, we would have to verify it. At the end of the day, some kind of evidence, and you really are going to end up defaulting to the last things that we know save water, which are your fixtures
Yeah.
and the types of irrigation.
I just don't want to nail this down
No, we
so
don't have to.
tight. I want to leave staff some leeway in using their judgment.
Sure.
Because everybody I've talked to, literally everybody, their situation is a little bit different.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That was a helpful discussion, at least for me, to learn a little bit more about the process, but, do we have consensus there? Do you want to now recap?
I understand
Yeah,
now.
You're
No,
good?
we understand now. We're
All
good.
right.
Can we just recap it for everyone?
Okay. The process that will be used when we received an appeal is first I call it check the math, do the historical, which again is just referring to the period of time that was used, 2013, for summer winter target. We're not going back further. And then the second step will be the calculator, which we still need to discuss the factors, so we're comfortable. And I think it would be helpful for us to get council direction on
Yeah.
gallons per indoor use. See what that number results into. And then if the customer is still not satisfied, it is up to the customer pursuant to this code section to provide for us whatever the customer would like to provide to show they've done the most that they can.
Okay.
Good.
And we will offer, I'm assuming it's still okay for staff to offer the free audits voluntarily if somebody
Oh,
wants
yeah.
staff to do it.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
To number one now, the,
Could I make a quick comment
Sure.
here? I'm really moved by Heather Allen, her mother. I really feel like, when I took this job, I thought, one of the great things about Sierra Madre is it's small. And I've always told people, I hear people gripe about government all the time, and it's always about bureaucracy, big, complex bureaucracy. And I don't think we have that here. But when we don't get back to somebody after several months and leave them hanging like that, that's like bureaucracy. And I hadn't heard your explanation until tonight, and I think it's plausible, but I really do believe we need to do a better job to respond to our
Understand.
citizens. I really do.
Point well made.
okay. Recommendation number one, the enforcement of the water conservation ordinance, the local ordinance now. Very, very popular item here. Whether we want to start instituting penalties on our own, beyond the state. What do
Well,
you guys
I
think?
feel we need to do it. I'm a little, my comment that I wrote here when I'm looking at the Ener Commission's recommendations, my comment to myself is that the punishment should fit the crime. And I think this is, I really can't see how it's justified to ramp this up as high as the recommendations are. Then staff came back later and said, we can't even do that with the billing system anyway. So, I'm just thinking about the original penalties that we put in place, which is twice the Tier 1 water rate, and then a second violation 3 times the Tier 1 water rate. When I look at how the distribution is over the so-called violators that the data is, the system kicked out, if you're using 1 to 5, if you're over, and we twice the Tier 1 rate, so it's about $5 a unit. So for 2 units over, it's going to cost you $10. That's not that high, and it's enough to make you think about it, but it's not really penalizing you severely because you haven't committed a crime and murdered somebody or something like that, So, but then again, those that are going over 100, it's going to hit them pretty good, So I'm leaning towards the original way we drafted this is probably appropriate. I may be willing to go down a little bit for the first violation, just because I want to tread lightly here. Because what we're really just trying to do is get people's attention and encourage them. We're not trying to really penalize them per se. So just that kind of sums up my thinking on it. I want to try to tread lightly with this, but I do definitely want to put in some sort of penalty for exceeding the conservation targets.
I want to hear more discussion.
Yeah, well, and I'll go
I
here.
might be persuadable,
I was gonna
Mayor
say-
Pro Tem. I came into the meeting kind of against it, but I'd kind of like to hear, it seems to me that we're at 27%, so that's now below the 30%. So certainly we need to do something. We've just decided that we're going to now go after people who are violating the state rules, which I think is going to save us some water. I'm just looking for a compelling reason to go to the next step. And your argument was basically that we need to go after these 25% that are skating by.
Well, it's also, remember how I started it, to say, we put on a water moratorium here. And I want to make sure that everything we do is, we're acting consistently. To me, that's a pretty drastic thing to do, to put on a moratorium on new meters and then not be enforcing our own code. The other is, I mentioned about the Metropolitan Water District. That is an emergency connection. We don't know what kind of pressures the MWD is going to put on, their members are going to put on them. We are not an MWD member. And I think it's just foolish to assume that, we have this right to that water. And I think by establishing a very consistent record that we are serious about conservation. And how do you say we're not serious about conservation if we continue to not enforce our own ordinance? So, that really is what's driving my thinking on it. And I think, again, we've been very light touch, gave people plenty of time. We've publicized this thing to death, and we still have 25% of people that are not complying. That number may go down when we do the budget analysis, the water budget analysis. But still, as you can see, there's some people that apparently are flaunting the law here. So that's where I'm coming out.
I think what really jumps out at me first are those that are in the appeal process, and Ms. Allen did bring up a very valid argument about those that are in the pipeline, and how do we determine what happens with those 71? Two is, it is 25% of the folks that are not meeting these targets. And as we went through this, it's 73% that are between the 1 and 20. And I definitely am not in favor of this 5 times and 10 times. I think, where we are with the water race, we heard that over and over again. Those of us that just campaigned, that was, really big issue, and as it should be, because our rates are significantly higher than other surrounding towns. Triple the amount. So, I can understand your point, Mayor Pro Tem. At the same time, those that are 1 to 4, 5 to 9 in excess of their target, I just can't see that penalty going through. So, yeah, I'd like to hear other discussion in this also.
Would you support a lower penalty?
See, I'd like to see how we can structure this differently, but from what I understand, we cannot. I don't like the lower penalty. I'd be okay with the lower penalty for those maybe in the mid-range, maybe these 2 folks that are doing the 200 plus, maybe the 10 times. I'm just kidding. But, it's, I don't know where the balance is, but I do have an issue with the penalties on missing these targets. Again, I have to admit, I am not very familiar with my own water bill, and this has forced me to do so. But when I'm thinking, for us, 2 people in the home, and we hit 11, great. But when I'm hearing other folks that have 3, 4 people that our target rates are, we have to make sure that the formulas are correct, the calculations are correct before we start issuing penalties.
But, isn't that what we've already done and is
No.
part of the process?
It's a start, I think, and I think that, again, that's when we're looking at the appeals. I think it's a start.
I think, well, first of all, I have a problem with putting a penalty on when people don't know how much water they're actually using until like 60 days later. So we just heard tonight that you can't really be picking up those smart meters without risking the wires. So somehow and we can't do that right now because we have to put the radio meters in, but we also need to get to a point where we are doing the calculations equally for everybody. And we waited months for those 70 people that appealed, so I would like to see those all cleared up first, and then talk about who we need to penalize. And I think everybody, when you go over your target, should be penalized, but those that are going over by a little bit should not be penalized as much as those that are going over. But until we get the appeals cleared up and see if we can figure out some way that people can look at their meter, because if you go over one unit, I mean, you don't really know unless you're looking at your meter every day. So you have to penalize them. And overall, 75% of our people are doing what they're supposed to do.
Is that enough?
No. We need to have 100%, but at some point, we need to start putting the penalties. But I'd like to see the appeals go through first and talk about how we can get the radio meters going too, because we need to be able to look at our water usage and not wait 60 days and then say, oh, okay.
We can't really make this contingent on that. I mean, that's
No,
not going to
we
happen.
can't. I would like to start looking at it.
In the foreseeable future, so.
Yeah.
You have anything? No. Okay. I'll just say, when I first read this, what was this, 2.5 weeks ago, preparing for our last council meeting, I was dead set against it. I thought it was just not the right time. I thought we had somewhat of a tin ear. If we're going to congratulate folks, the community, on conserving 30% and then reward them with mandatory penalties, I thought that it just was sending the wrong message. And I still do, to a certain extent. I think that there are a fair amount of folks that aren't meeting their target. But again, I see a lot of folks that are just missing it. I see a lot of folks that are doing their best and coming up a little short. And to me, that means, for the most part, 85% of the people, and maybe even 90, are doing a really good job. And then you have maybe like a 10%, and it's hard. I think the Mayor Pro Tem's right. Without seeing absolute usages, if these are like 100-unit users that are only going over 5, then it might be a different story. But for me, I do think the community has responded really well to our call for conservation, and they've done it on a voluntary basis without penalties. And I do think that enforcing the state's rules is fair. These are going to be applied in every city, from Arcadia to Pasadena to Glendora to San Francisco. And as a Sierra Madre resident, I could stomach that. I could say, look, we're all being treated fairly, whether I live in Sierra Madre, whether I live in Temple City, et cetera. What gets me is, if I weren't sitting here and I was sitting in those chairs, is, the question that keeps coming up is, why do I keep getting punished for a regional issue, for an issue that everyone else is causing throughout this county, throughout our neighboring counties, and throughout the state? And I don't think there's a good answer for that, because I think it's a really good gripe, which is, we in Sierra Madre are in a somewhat precarious water situation where we really only have one natural source. We're at the shallow end of our aquifer, and we see our neighbors not suffering as much. And knowing all this, City Council, you come back and you reward us again with these penalties. And for all those kind of philosophical and practical reasons, I really don't like this. I think it's symbolically a good message. I think the one thing that moved me a little bit listening to all of you guys was, the Mayor Pro Tem's point about, we've put on a water moratorium, we've said we're serious about it, but then at the end of the day, we're not going to enforce, the penalties that we've put on the books. To me, that's the most compelling thing from a symbolic kind of standpoint, and, from a messaging standpoint, which is, if we're going to take this water moratorium seriously, then we're going to take it seriously. But I think from a practical standpoint, I'm still not convinced that we need the penalties right now, especially because we're now instituting enforcement of the state restrictions and the state fines. And I would like to see more time. Having more time would give us an opportunity to get through the 71 appeals and think about more whether we do want to penalize folks that are 1 to 4 units over. I don't know. I mean, I think that if someone trips, and I'm unclear in my mind as to whether someone that's 3 units over should get penalized.
Well, there's a way to
There's
do
one
that.
argument that says, you make it low enough to where it's, like you said, it's a reminder, it's a $10 to $20 penalty. It kind of gives them a notice that, hey,
There's a way, I think there's a way to deal with that,
Mhm.
if we were inclined
we
to
could.
think about that.
Yeah. You know, at this point, I guess I would be inclined to wait
Yeah,
on these, but.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like
I'll
to
end
just
there.
make a point
Yeah.
too, is, you know, I've heard this from many people that have been busting their butts to comply, and now we're telling them that,
Yeah.
you know, we really weren't serious and you did this for nothing. That really bothers
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
For all those people that really have tried to comply and are complying, you know, I mean, how much longer? We've already put this off for 6 months. But I think there's a way to deal with your concern, and we all have that concern of just somebody who's going over 2, 3 units, 5 units. One way maybe is to just trick the system, is that you publish, like on my bill, I think my target was 15. So you print 15, but really in the system it's 17. So it doesn't generate.
So it's really a 25% target or whatever.
Why not?
You could.
Why not?
Yeah, you
I
could do
mean,
easily.
that would keep you from penalizing somebody who's only going a little bit over
Yeah.
the
And it
target.
would work better in my mind because it's percentage based. It's
Yeah.
not just based on, you know, total units.
That's innovative, but,
I actually like that idea.
I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
Well, you know, what I'd like to hear is suggestions. I've heard, you know, from Councilmember Arizmendi that you have concerns, but you haven't really offered up something that fixes the many problems and issues we have.
At first, we need to clean up the appeals. And everybody needs to be on the same playing field.
And what do you mean by that?
I want all these appeals cleaned up.
How
And-
does that level the playing field?
Well, then, these 70 people are gonna know what their numbers really are. If they're really trying really super hard to conserve, and they have this low target that they can never, ever meet, and it could possibly have a higher target, then they should be able to do that. So once
Okay.
that's, I'm not talking 6 months or 8 months, I'm talking, you know what, a month or 6 weeks to get it cleared up. And then we have to talk about what the penalties should be. And yes, this is my feeling, if we're gonna put penalties for the people that are going over, then you have to do it for everybody. You know, and I don't like the whole tier thing and the percentages. I would like to see a money value, like a,
Okay, if I can just ask though, I mean, we have 71 appeals, but my guess is that there are a lot of people that have gone over their target, haven't paid attention, and they're going to appeal once they get hit in the pocketbook. So how does separating those that have appealed?
no, I'm
Versus
talking about
those.
those that are in the pipeline, those that we have right now, those
Yeah.
71 appeals, get them cleaned up. Also look at what happens when, you know, we've already instituted penalties for the state mandate, so we've done that tonight, so we're taking
Okay.
one step. But we are extremely concerned about this drought going forward too.
Yeah.
And we need to really start taking some action, and I'm sorry, but we are gonna have to start penalizing those that just flat out don't wanna play by the rules.
So just, okay, and you know, I'd be okay with just postponing this portion of it where we don't implement these right now. If, you know, there's concern about those in the pipeline, we want to clear that backlog and get that done. But what do you think you might be, I mean, you must be thinking and having an idea about what is appropriate.
What about can consider a flat fee for certain,
Ooh, see, that I don't like because that is very harsh for somebody who just barely went over it.
well, no, so again, I'm going back to my, looking at tiers, but I don't think, 1 to 4 is a flat fee. But, when we're talking about egregious, using that term, I mean, there's some of these that it can be, I think, a flat fee that just says, here, you want to use this much water?
Our system can't do flat fee and 2 times tier 1, for example.
Okay.
The system can't handle.
Well, it's good to
that
know
many-
what the parameters are, so we can have this
Parameters are,
discussion.
the system also can't handle a flat fee.
Oh, it cannot.
The system is set up right now, because it's the way the ordinance was drafted and we paid for the programming. The parameters we can adjust. Right now, the system's set up 2 times tier 1 for any amount over tier one rates right now are $2 and $2.21. So if someone goes over by 1, they're gonna pay $4.42. So, but if somebody goes over by 100, then they're gonna be paying $400. So the way it's set up right now
Progressive.
is progressive, and it's, it's a small amount if you only go over by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and it's a large amount if you go over by 100. Now, what we can adjust in this formula, it could be, remember we have we have what, the factor, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and we have the tier. We can change those as long as they're the same for everyone. So council could say instead of 2 times tier 1 is the least expensive. You could do 3 times tier 1, but it would be for everybody, every unit. You could do 2 times tier 4. Those are the parameters, those are the things you can adjust, and that the system will handle automatically. We could do a flat fee, we could have a more complicated part flat fee, but it would require manual entry, and it would slow down our water billing process, because we would be processing, there's 900 bills you saw overage in the slide. That's manually processing 900 bills. It would slow us down, we'd be late getting out water bills. And anytime you insert a manual process in, it's prone for human error. So, staff's recommendation is the 2 times tier 1 is the least costly.
Or 1 times tier 1.
Could be 1 times tier 1.
Another, well, the 2 would mean, yeah.
The first penalty could be 1 time, the second penalty.
To go to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, a lot of the people that are making their targets are doing so because they are following the state mandate. And so I think we can tell them, certainly that's the case in my household, that it hasn't been all for naught, that there has been actually something meaningful to what we've been asked to do. And now we're going out and enforcing the state mandate to make sure everyone else is paying there. I think there's some, I think that's goes to the equity argument. I want to be very clear. I went back and looked at the tape when we decided to go to Tier 3 back last summer. And when it was the same meeting, we had the 30%. And we went on for the water moratorium. And I looked at what I said. I looked at what everybody said, but I kind of looked at what I said. And I said something to the effect that I want, when we had the water problems cleared up, discoloration problems cleared up, so that we weren't penalizing people for running their water clear, and we'd given them enough notice, and we had agreed it was going to be 2-3 months at least, that I wanted to see penalties enforced rigorously as a matter of equity, to be fair to people. What happened in the interim was that we started saving water. We got to 30%. And so we kind of defanged ourselves. And now I see we're dropping back down to 27. Weather's very warm, and water usage is going to go up. It's not going to go down from this point, I don't believe. So I think that, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, I think we need to work a lot of kinks out here, but I don't think we should kid ourselves. I think we should put some kind of deadline for the council, either re-agendize this for maybe early April, maybe mid-April, April 15th, good timing. But get it back in front of us with the because I'm not hearing anyone that's opposed to water fines at this point. We just don't feel like we can do it fairly at this point. So I would like to reconsider this with an idea that, and I'd like the public to know about it. I think we're all about ready to pull the trigger here. I think the public needs to know that, and maybe that would light a fire under some people. But I think, at least as of this point, I think there are just too many problems with this to try to go forward with it.
I'm glad you brought up the discoloration, because we do have residents who are still going through that discoloration. And, we don't want to penalize them for having to flush out too, but. And I think we should start at like 2 times tier 1. And then if we need to go higher, then we can see how we all do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind how we wrote the ordinance the first time. I don't mind the rates as they are. I mean, I think the cheaper, they're pretty fair They're not exorbitantly expensive. I don't mind Councilmember Goss's suggestion. My only concern is knowing our agenda's coming up. You know, trying to fit this in again. So instead of reconsidering this, I don't know if we're going to be able to wrestle this to the ground again. I mean, I think we're taking a lot of time with it now. Why not just pick a date a few months out from now and say?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
The suggestion of waiting till the backlog is cleared. After the backlog is cleared, do you think that will change how you think about any of this?
No.
So why don't we just say we'll do it and implement it 30 days, 60 days from now, and just get it over with?
Right. That's exactly what I was
Then
going to
in the
say.
meantime, the backlog gets cleared, we have more time to publicize, unless there is an objection to implementing the penalties.
I think the work that we did with educating the public with the state ordinance is going to have to be done with this piece too. I mean, I don't know if everyone really goes through the details when they get their water bill. So I would definitely consider that, looking at a later date, but making sure well, number one, that the 71 appeals have been addressed. It would be interesting to see, once we have penalties on the state ordinance, if that really makes a difference on people's water usage. But regardless, we just need to make sure that we are adequately communicating out to the public that these rate increases will be in effect starting
Right.
on this date.
It's not a rate increase.
Sorry.
It's a penalty.
Prop 218, right? So that these penalties will be instituted on X, Y date. And
So is that something you're willing to consider? I mean, are you okay with the rates, the way we established them?
the 1-2, yeah, the 2%, I mean, sorry.
It's just a matter of when we do it, or is there other information you want to see that would help you make a different
I
suggestion?
think the communicating out the percentages that we first approved, and not the proposed ones, I think I'd be okay with that.
So-
And then the 71 appeals, making sure that those are cleared.
Right, so, I mean, how long would it take to clear the appeals or work through it? I mean, I don't know that every last one needs to be, it doesn't change what we're proposing to do. I mean, I understand that we want to get it done. Actually, I don't really understand, but I'm okay with working through that backlog before we implement the penalties. But how long do you think it would take to get through the backlog?
I mean, why
Right.
couldn't we just?
I think I would, probably what I would recommend, because of the timing of when we read meters and bills going out, one of the problems we ran into when we were first looking at implementing penalties is you don't want to implement them effective today, for example,
Yeah.
because people have already been using water and haven't had a chance.
Right.
I think we've looked at it, if you choose something 4 months out, we do the advertising, the publicity, put notices in the next 2 billing cycles, that 4 months out, we're going to start imposing penalties. That gives everyone plenty of notice, and we will have cleared all the backlog by then.
July
We
1.
would have cleared all the and any new ones that might come up now that people are
Yeah,
realizing we're going to start imposing penalties, that 71 is going to grow to a larger number.
yeah.
Yeah, and let's just, Councilmember Goss, I think you might be the only one to have reservations about that. I mean, because you're the one that proposed maybe bringing this back, so what do you think about that?
I think my primary concern is, from what I got tonight from Director Inman and for what I've been reading in the media in the last few weeks, is that we are not through the drought. I thought we were in December. I thought, hallelujah, we weren't going to have this conversation. Darn it all, we're having it.
Yeah.
And gosh, we had this huge downpour up in the north, but they didn't get a lot of snow, and we didn't get it down here. Now we're almost, a third of the way through February. So I'm very concerned. I was very serious when I spoke in that meeting back last summer that I was very concerned when the MWD back then was talking about possible rationing in January of this year. And they were also encouraging water ordinances, which I took to mean the moratorium would fit into that category. So I think I pretty much agree with most of what Mayor Pro Tem is saying. I think that we have to be pretty consistent here if we're really trying to save water, and if we're trying to be fair to people who have been saving water. The 75% of the city who's been saving water are, I'm sure, not real happy about their neighbors who are taking advantage of this. So at some point, I think we have to stand up for them. So I guess you could persuade me that I think July 1st, I think, is a reasonable amount of time for people to figure this out.
Right in the dead of summer. I'm sure that won't upset people
Well,
at
no,
all.
the good thing with July 1st, no. The good thing with July 1st is it's the previous months that are in the July, so it's really going to be the tail end of spring. You wouldn't want to do it December 1st because then you are picking up some summer months for some folks.
So this will give people time to make sure that their target number, if they feel that it needs to be adjusted, it can be adjusted. So that will give them that time. And I do think that, you know, we have so many people, 75%, who are abiding by the rules, that they're not going to be affected by it. It's that 25%. And overall, the goal is to conserve water because we don't have any. So that's the overall goal. So this isn't that we're penalizing to get money for the city. It's to make people aware that you are using more water than you're allowed. And you're not allowing us to come to our 30% conservation. So that's what the penalty is. Hopefully, once they're aware of it, maybe they're not even aware, then they'll cut back, yeah.
So I think we have.
I have a quick question real
Absolutely.
quick. When does the summer base target hit? When is that in effect?
It depends on which side of the city you are on, and I didn't bring that information with me. I don't have it memorized. I could probably look it online on our website. I don't have it memorized.
June-ish?
I think, Sonia brought the information, so I can tell you exactly. It depends on if you're on the east or west side of town. Thank you, Sonia. Okay. Okay, if you're east
Baldwin.
of Baldwin, let's see, it would be your
Starts in June, I believe.
March, May, I'll do cover, it's confusing. If you're east of Baldwin, I'll do when you're actually using the water. It's the period between December and June. Because the bill dates are different. So if you're east of Baldwin, winter rates are all the water used between December and June.
Got it.
If you're west of Baldwin, it's all the water used between November and May. Summer, if you're east of Baldwin, it's all the water used between June and October. And if you're west of Baldwin, it's all the water used between May and November.
Thank you.
And this chart's on our website.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think we have consensus there, unless I'm mistaken. But July 1st, I'm fine with the penalties as they're presented, which is twice the tier 1 for the first, 3 times the tier 1 for the second. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Okay, next one is what?
Now back to staff recommendations. The individual water meters for all multi-unit residential development.
I'm all for it.
It's a no-brainer in my mind. Any no opposition there? Add the water budget estimating tool to the website. Again,
Please.
please, yeah.
As fast as possible.
So I think we've covered everything unless,
If we could go back to the water tool, maybe Director Inman can
Oh,
put
that's
that
right.
back up.
Yeah.
Since we're going to be using that as the next step in processing appeals, we need to make sure we're comfortable with, for example, it was 55 gallons per day for
yeah, and I'm
a
just
person
gonna,
for interior use.
I'll start the conversation. I don't need to even back up,
Okay.
put back up. I am speaking from such a level of, lack of education on this. There's no reason for me to question the 55. I think Mayor Pro Tem might have some basis, but I'm not sure if the other council members really would know 55 versus 65.
55 to 65 is the range you could select from. They're both legally or scientifically defensible. You would just need to tell us where you want it to be within 55 to 65.
For example, the
Yeah.
the molten, Irvine, what is it, molten, what?
You can come up.
Molten Nagel, they use this for their rates. They start with 65.
They start with.
They start with 65. But they also, you know, in that document that I sent out, said in Orange County, others go as low as 55.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, then it's probably fair for our residents to start with a higher number. That gives them,
Well, that, or there's two ways. It's the then, you
Yeah,
know,
are you,
Mr. Director Raymond put
the
30%.
indoor or the outdoor, right?
Well, no, the 30%.
oh, well, yeah, you can change that, or,
I would recommend, if you go with the 65, for example, then the 30% probably makes sense.
appropriate.
If you go with the 55 gallons,
30% is too
30% is
much.
too much.
So
Just a gut feeling.
I would be okay with starting with that 65 is a reasonable number. It's at the high end of the standard, and we're asking you to go 30% below that, consistent with our conservation goals.
And
So
can
we're
we-
starting from a high point.
sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Can we just get some assurance? I mean, is 65 at the high, you know, is 65, if either of you know, I'm kind of taking everyone's word for it here, which is fine, but,
You know, the numbers really are all over the chart depending on where you are geographically. I mean, you go to San Francisco and per capita use is under 50 gallons per day.
Right.
You know, you come here to Southern California and it's, you know, 65, 75, even more depending on how big a lot is.
No, that number
No,
is
the
for
per
personal
person
use
imperial.
only.
Yeah.
So you take that number and it's estimated that about 70% of that is used for landscape irrigation. So
No.
No.
This is,
No.
it would help if you put the formula back up, Bruce, so we can see. This is the gallons
I'll
per
pull it up. I've
person
got the
for
doc.
interior, for inside house use. It's the first one in the formula.
Right there.
Right there, up at the top, I have it right here, that number. Number of people times the,
and then we're factoring,
and the 30% comes off at the bottom.
that's very reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if, like in this example here with 65, how that impacts the very end number, and is this just
We
this
don't
is an
have a
Excel
live way
spreadsheet.
of doing that.
Well,
I'm just
okay,
wondering
here-
what
I-
that means in units, like
Well, I can
have
tell
no
you.
idea.
I can tell you. 'Cause
yeah, you're right, it's
I
220
will,
versus,
yeah.
I agree, I mean, I don't know how that translates, so.
Well, just,
It's gonna be from a percentage standpoint, it's like an 8% bump, right?
using,
It might be a little less.
well, using the Irvine example, as I went into there, just for example, for a family of 4, it would give you, hold on. Wait, 3 bits,
Excuse me.
4 occupants.
We do 4 times 65.
Excuse me, Chris just pointed out to me that the difference between 65 and 55 here is 1 unit per billing cycle.
Thank you, that's helpful to hear that.
Okay.
Okay. So then on page 2, or the result, it would be, the summer base cycle would be 33.
1 unit per billing cycle per person?
Second page of your chart, Bruce, sorry.
Per person, though?
You're right.
Per person.
Which is,
So a family of 4 would be 4 units, which
So
is
this would be 36.
significant.
Oh, it's pretty significant.
But, okay, that's 10 per day.
See, I did a calculation just for
A little less than
occupants using similar numbers, and it came up with 13 units for a 2-month period.
Difference.
13 total.
Oh,
Yeah, with significantly
And
different.
for
what we
3
just heard.
family members, it would drop down to less than 10. So roughly same, you know? So, and again, these are numbers that are general in use, you know? And again, we can't do a study for Sierra Madre and nail it down that much. I guess you could, but I don't know if it's going to buy us that much. I mean, my point is to start with somewhat of a light touch with this, and if we need to adjust later, we can. But I think these are pretty reasonable numbers.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
go ahead, sorry.
I need to go here, I'm sorry, I have to go here. When staff does this calculation, let's use an example, they've been given the lowest number of 12, which is the lowest number anyone's given. We go through this exercise and it comes up with a big number of 40. we look at their historical uses during their historical water use, and the highest they ever went was 20. I'm hoping the council isn't thinking we're going to give them the new number of 40. We'll give them something closer to
Yeah.
their higher historical of 20, for example. Just to be
think it's a really
clear,
good point.
I can see that happen, because some folks, that's going to happen in situations where you have somebody who really is closer to the 55 because they're very efficient and they've really been conserving. And I can see this happening, especially with folks who really have been very good conservers.
Yeah.
And to give them a bigger number than they ever even used during the months we look at to come up with the initial numbers, I think could upset our apple cart, and we could end up continuing to get lesser and less total conservation as we go forward.
Well, that is the danger of the system, is you kind of live and die by it, right? I mean, there's going to be some people where it gives them
And I
less
think
and
as
some people
long
give
as
them
we
more.
can show, because we know what the numbers are for their 3 bills in the summer and the 3 bills in the winter, this comes up with a much larger number. It's part of the conference. We can sit down and say, look, this comes up with a big number of 50, but you've never used more than 20. Your number's 12, you've never used more than 20, and come up with a number that's closer to the 20.
What about the comment from Ms. Sheridan where she has 12, I think the number is, but, her point is, well, I've gotten that number because I've sacrificed over the years, and I'd kind of like some reprieve from that sacrifice. I would like an 18 or whatever it is.
We would look at this, and again, if her number came out to be a 40 under this formula, she's a 12 now, and her historical uses, again, maybe the most she ever reached was 25, we'd be somewhere closer to the 25.
Yeah.
I don't know where exactly.
So it's using this as a guide.
It's using it
more
as
or
a
less,
guide.
As an anchor
And then,
almost.
and then comparing it to historical data and finding a means to compromise.
To compromise.
It's to avoid penalizing those who have
Yep,
been
that's the whole point. That's the whole
Yes.
point, is that you want to give people some sort of goal and reward for conserving, not penalizing them.
Yeah, I just wanted to
penalizing them
set the
further.
record straight that if we do end up with situations where it's a much larger number after, that we're not automatically going to give that much more larger number if they've never used that much water.
So 65.
I'm fine. I mean,
But being able to articulate, I think that's an important point, though. That this is not going to be the end-all. This is your number.
Okay, then,
And the next thing that would be helpful for staff, it's going to be very time-consuming. I can tell you, Director Inman did one for Councilmember Delmar. It's time-consuming looking at the Google Earth and our assessors. It's a lot of work. And I'm going to ask, but you don't have to agree to this. It would be easier if the initial numbers, we had the resident measure their lot and tell us how much they think is turf and trees and flowers, and we could verify it by going on Google Earth. It will speed up the processing of these 71. If we could ask the residents to provide their lot size, how many square feet their structure is, how much of their yard is turf, grass, flowers, trees.
okay, in lieu of that, I mean, is it just another I think that's a good idea, but is it, if the customer didn't even want to do that, then could we just use some averages to say, we know how big your lot is, we know how big your house is by just property records, and then make just an assumption that we would just carry forth to say, we'll assume another percentage of your lot is paved, and this is your number unless you give us better information.
Information.
Based on what I saw this morning going through a number of these, it's going to be very difficult to use a generality or any sort of an assumption because properties differ so widely in the type of landscaping. Some have a lot of lawn, others have little patches of lawn. It really, they need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to be getting anywhere with the customer. We're just going to be continuing the discussion with them as they say, oh no, I've got more sidewalk than that. I've got more driveway than that. No, my house is bigger than that. One of the things I found, for example, in looking at the assessor's data on the structure size, not one of them was correct when I measured it against the aerial photography. So I don't know what the assessors is basing their stuff on, but I don't think they include garages.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. They certainly don't include patios and driveways and all that. So I really think that in fairness to the customer, we're going to need to do that level of analysis, or we're just going to be spinning our wheels.
Yeah. All right.
That's fine. Having them do it, how do you foresee this happening? Just to ask them, are we going to walk them through it?
Give
We're going
them
to tell
the
them?
form. We could explain what we need them to
Okay.
do and leave the form and show them how, and just describe how to measure it.
Yeah. What if the customer says, I've got 90% of my property is lawn, and I want to be able to water that lawn? Is that reasonable in a conservation environment where, we're hearing over and over again now that basically that's part of the problem why we consume so much water?
Director Inman and I talked about this. Using this formula, if they're 90% yard, there's this
Get more.
PF factor, they are going to get more water in this formula. But then we're reducing it by 30%. So they are going to have to cut back somewhere and they'll decide where. But yes, somebody with 90% lawn as opposed to 90% xeriscape, they're going to get more water under this formula with a lawn.
Yeah. Could we limit it to, I'm just not sure that's fair that somebody, continues to maintain a property full of lawn. I don't want to be in a position to tell people what they should or shouldn't be doing, but this is kind of well understood now that, excessive.
What percentages have we been seeing of lawn? I know it's hard to generalize.
We only sampled 5 or 6 today, and they all varied.
Okay.
And one had no lawn.
This again will just be used for those that are appealing.
Correct,
Right.
correct.
So, they'll get penalized maybe later down the road when we're looking at July 1, for those that are just,
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know. I think that they have a built-in advantage if they have more lawn. They get more water.
So we have to deal with it, huh?
I just think that,
Just accept it.
And
yeah. I
as
don't
the
like it,
drought
but-
goes on, we might have to make an
We
adjustment
might
to the,
come back and make an
you don't
adjustment.
want to
say,
do everything right now.
Right, and say the maximum that we would give you is 30%, for your lawn, or,
Okay, well,
I think it's a good point.
We can't do it all right
We're not
now.
gonna solve world hunger here on water. Yeah.
Or the drought, I know.
All right, so we're using 65. And the plant factor, you would
just leave that alone.
leave it alone?
Yeah, because then we have a built-in incentive to,
We'll be asking the residents initially to provide the measurements for us. If somebody needs help, I don't, pick an elderly person who just has no way of measuring, we'll help those, of course. I want to provide good customer service.
yeah.
But we'll initially try to get the measurements from the customer, and we'll do a verification to make sure that it looks okay.
Okay.
And we'll take it from there. We'll use 65, and then we'll reduce the bottom number by 30%.
One more question now. Madam City Attorney, are you going to come back with a resolution for us? Because you wanted to do this, your suggestion is to do this
We don't-
by resolution?
We have the,
Don't need anything.
We don't need it?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
Everything you've discussed this evening is allowable under our current ordinance.
Oh, okay.
Because you didn't change penalties, for example.
Right.
We already have a process for a conference. We could come back with a resolution on
No, no.
consent calendar, just to memorialize it, so there's something in writing. We could put a resolution on the next, to memorialize the July 1st, we're gonna start implementing. It's probably a good idea
That's a
to
good
do
idea.
that. So we'll put this together in a resolution, put it on the consent calendar for the next meeting.
You good with that?
yeah, I'm fine with that. We have one more, I'm gonna open this up for just last minute public comment. We usually don't do this, but we were talking about this a long time. If any folks want parting comments before we close this out. Okay, well,
We're waiting for maybe everybody to leave
I
before we
know,
open it up.
I know.
I'm a little confused about where we're going from here and how this affects appeals. I'm confused about what are you deciding tonight, if anything, about, I understand about the fines, I got that down. I don't understand whether appellants are subject to a mandatory inspection, and I I take issue with what the city manager said, that the historical is only for 2013, because that's simply not true. The historical usage that my neighbors had was all from the previous base year. I think it was 2011, 2012. And we filed our appeal in September of 2013. So, I really think that you should look at our case on our historical usage. I don't even think you should be using the GIS information or the Google map or any of that. Like I said, the appellants should follow under the rules prior to whatever is discussed or voted on tonight. You're changing the rules midstream. And I appreciate what Councilman Del Mar said. We need to button this up. We need to wrap this up. What's happening is the appeals are being kind of homogenized in with, the activity that's going on tonight. And that is just wrong. That is just wrong. So I would really ask you, in fairness to your constituents, to please solve the problems with the 71 appeals. Pretend we never had this conversation tonight about all this new formula, if you can. And when that's done, you can move to new business. But I really feel it's unfair that after waiting so long, which has actually been since September of 2013, that's how long we've been on these low numbers. I resent having to wait longer, truthfully. I thought it was going to be finished tonight. I'm tired. And where was I going with this train of thought? I just think, we need to be thought of as like grandfathered in is the only word I can think of. If you can somehow rewind back in time and think about how did we come up with numbers for those first target numbers that went out in summer and winter, like my neighbors that had 52 and 40, there's no way the the historical year could have been 2013. Because those numbers were awarded in July or August of 2013. So this business about the historical usage year was 2013 is absolutely false. Let's stick to the truth. Let's do what's right. Let's clean up the appeals under the old rules with the old criteria. And if you want to change anything or talk about it or vote or do whatever for the new people, that's your business. But, be fair. Do what's right. That's all I ask of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
To answer that, what is the old rules?
The old rules would have been looking to make sure that the math was correct. I am 90% sure they were 2013 bills for calendar year 2013.
Okay.
And we would just go back to make sure that the math was correct. The only thing we could adjust with the old rules is, let's say if for the three billing cycles for the winter, they bought the house only 1 month it was occupied, 2 months it was vacant, we can make an adjustment for that. If somebody had a new baby, or more people living there than live there, and they proved there's more people living there today, we could make an adjustment for that. It was really very limited. This actually does provide more flexibility for adjusting numbers. We were very limited based on the 6 bills during the period of time that the targets were established.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I guess the question that Ms. Allen brought up that I'm questioning now is, when the appeal was filed, going back from the historical data at that point, not from today's point. So that's what you do, correct?
We look, by historical data, we make sure that those months that were included to come up with the winter and summer target were correct. Those were all months in 2013.
Okay.
Now, what gets a little confusing is that earlier on, there was a different method, a different target. Everyone had the same target. That was using months that went into 2012. That was the first go-round. There were some 2012 and 2013 months the first time. The second time around with the winter and summer, I'm pretty sure they were all 2013 months. That's what makes it a little confusing.
So the numbers that were used in the 2012 and 2013, they got discarded when the new
Correct.
came. So if they had in 2012, if that group, had a different amount but we got rid of all those got thrown away, and then everybody went to the 2013.
Completely recalculated everyone's.
So tonight, what we did was we gave the people who are going through this appeals an extra step in trying to get those changed with the calculator.
More than an extra step.
Yeah.
We gave you another avenue to adjust your numbers that you did not have before. So I would just suggest, I understand what you're asking, but I would not be in favor of restricting your ability to meet your objective. We're not going to take away what we decided tonight because it's in your benefit. So why would we deny you that opportunity? Well, so,
We're gonna. Okay. Any other comments before we move on?
There are so many components to this ordinance, and you've discussed so many variations of each one, that I would suggest that before you vote on anything, you have this conglomerate of consensus that you might have come to rewritten so that we can all read it once more and really know what you're actually voting for, which would only take a few minutes at the next meeting.
yeah, we've
Yeah,
already
we're bringing a
decided.
resolution back.
Yeah.
You have
That's
some.
what we're doing.
Okay, good.
We just discussed that.
Okay. All right, we will move on. You guys want to take a 5-minute break, or do you guys want to move on?
I just want to move on.
Okay.
Someone has an early flight tomorrow. This-
All right.
Oh, that one over there. Oh, my
Oh,
God.
yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
The next one is the recommendation to approve the 2015 Sidewalk Master Plan. We have Director Inman and Management Analyst Carlson.
Here we are on the screen again. I've prepared what I hope will be a brief executive summary of this lengthy document that we provided to the council. The Sidewalk Master Plan is one of the items that is in the strategic plan that was most recently adopted by the City Council, and we'll just take it off from here. The goals of this master plan was, the goal was to provide essentially a planning document that could be referenced by the department and other city departments going into the future to essentially plan for continuous improvements in pedestrian transportation around the community. What the master plan does is it provides inventories of all existing standard and non-standard sidewalks, inventories of all segments of streets with no sidewalk or sections of streets that have discontinuous sidewalks, a missing lot here and there, for example. It identifies opportunities and constraints for future sidewalk considerations, recommends changes and additions to existing programs and policies. We use this to build upon existing prioritization criteria for repair and installation, and the plan also identifies potential funding sources. So when I originally proposed this master plan at a strategic planning meeting, the idea was to simply create an inventory of needed sidewalk repairs and then create a plan to make those repairs. So we did that. And in Appendix B to this plan, you will see page after page of over 600 sidewalk defects that were cataloged by a Public Works staff member that quite literally walked the community and took measurements and made these records. Appendix B includes two lists. List number 1 includes the temporary repairs that have yet to be done. And list number 2, which is about the same length, covers all the temporary repairs that were done in 2014. And then beginning on page 45 of the plan, we prioritize the repairs, we provide estimated costs, man-hours to complete the repairs, and a goal of having all of those temporary repairs in list 1 completed by the end of 15-16. Now, we could have stopped there and called the task done, as the task was described when I originally proposed it at the strategic planning meeting, but as I looked at it, it just didn't seem to be the complete document. There were questions that I felt would be asked that had been left unanswered. So I'll go through a few of those. Hopefully that'll help you out. How do we prioritize the repairs? We cover that on page 28. And this is something that is really coming out of JPIA recommendations. We categorize sidewalk damage primarily as A through D, with A being any defect that is in the vicinity of a sensitive location such as a school or other high pedestrian area. As it says on the slide, a deficiency rating of actually A would be given no matter how much the amount of displacement. It really gives priority to locations. And then we cover the prioritization further on page 45 of the document. Again, the sidewalk inspection and repair priorities program is based on a model that was provided by the California JPIA, and that inspection program is included in the master plan as Appendix A. And how will we be making, okay, let me slow down and talk right. How will we be making the repairs? We will continue to use our normal temporary repair methods, either grinding down raised sections or placing asphalt ramps. What about the trees? And that really gets to a crux of the matter. As you might imagine, the primary cause of sidewalk damage is going to be trees. And as long as that offending tree is left in place, we would not consider any repair of that sidewalk to be permanent, because root-caused damage will continue to reoccur. So in the plan, instead of the term permanent, we use the term long-term repairs. This plan, for those that are particularly concerned about tree well-being and the community forest, the plan does not advocate wholesale removal of parkway trees in order to correct sidewalk problems. That is not where we're coming from. And that is why we're using the term long-term repairs instead of permanent, because in the minds of the public works person, a permanent repair for a sidewalk that's damaged typically requires removal of the tree. That's not where we're going necessarily, because we understand that this community puts a high priority on their parkway trees. Now, I had to include this picture because it was such an outlandish solution to a problem. It's actually suggested that root bridging or bridging a sidewalk over tree roots could be a solution, and in some cases it happens naturally. Here is a case where it was actually done deliberately, and a situation like this, while it might be a long-term solution to a problem, it causes some other problems, like people parking there can't open their car doors. And people without handrails, people are going to fall off of this thing and hurt themselves.
Where's this picture from?
This was from basically a handbook on how to repair sidewalks. This is what we are not going to
I thought it was LA.
This is what we are not going to do. So this is an example of what we're not going to do, but I thought maybe a little humor what might lighten this up. How are we going to pay for the repairs? Pages 43 through 45 list our various funding sources, anywhere from Transportation Development Act funds, which we get a whopping $5,000 a year, to gas tax, to Measure R funds. Any of our standard street repair funding sources can be used for this. But of course, in order to use any of our standard street repair funding sources, that means we're going to repair less asphalt and roadway surface elsewhere. Again, what kind of repair options are there? On page 19, we list our temporary repairs, the marking, grinding, and ramping. For long-term repairs, we begin a list on page 33 that includes things like concrete interlocking pavers, rubber sidewalk, which was invented by the Public Works Department of Santa Monica and has been requested numerous times by the Tree Commission and now Energy Environment Commission. A similar product, a plastic plastic sidewalk pavers is shown there, as well as tree grates, poured-in-place rubber, and some other solutions. And all of those come with a cost comparison that's listed on page 42. One of the other questions that's important to cover is how do we ensure ADA compliance? We have to remain compliant with ADA. It is the law, and we do cover that on page 10 of the document in terms of minimum clearances. Those are also covered incidentally in Chapter 1224 of the Municipal Code in our tree ordinance, where we list minimum sidewalk clearances. The master plan does correlate with the general plan update. The master plan addresses circulation element policy L46.9 of the update regarding sidewalk continuity. It provides a prioritized list of new sidewalk installations, and pages 30 through 31 discuss the matter, as does some information on page 46. And the sidewalk master plan also touches on circulation element policies that are listed here. There's quite a lengthy list. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yep. Trash. Is there a trash can? Yeah.
I kept mine from the last meetings.
Director Inman,
So-
do we have a backlog for the partnership program? I mean, are there people that put in requests for where,
I do believe we have a backlog. We have a hard time keeping up with it because what we do is we typically wait until we have enough sidewalk work to schedule a full load of concrete. When we pay for partial
Yeah,
loads,
yeah.
we pay a greater amount. So
Yeah.
we try to group these things together so that we get the best bang for the buck, particularly since the customer's paying for the concrete.
exactly, yeah. So, okay, because that's the one I guess I'm most concerned about, because where we've got a willing resident that's willing to pay for it, but yet nothing happens for a long period of time. I mean, are we moving as fast as we can with those, or is it just a matter of prioritizing, or?
We did have a period earlier this year where there were some significant delays. We had some staff that was out of work, out on medical leaves for quite a lengthy period of time, and we were shorthanded as a result. So
Yeah.
we did develop a backlog there, but Chris and his staff are making progress towards beating that down and getting
Yeah.
caught up.
Okay. Okay.
Any questions? I have a few, Director Inman. To me, I do think that there's some tension here between our Tree City USA and our folks who don't want to die on our sidewalks, walking down the street. And I'm somewhat facetious there, but there are some spots where it's clear that there's a pretty significant obstruction with the routes coming up just on Sierra Madre Boulevard. We've asphalted it over, but it's still really dangerous for anyone, but especially our seniors, or someone in a wheelchair. Have we taken any steps, and I don't think we have, there's a lot of measures that you outline in here to maintain a tree, but also make sure the roots stay kind of away from the sidewalk, and whether it's boxing it in with whatever the material is, whether it's steel or I think you can do it with plastic, I'm not sure. But why haven't we done more of that?
Well, the problems that you're seeing today with the sidewalk that's vertically displaced, that's from mature trees, obviously. And the preventative measures that you could use to keep that from happening need to go into place when
They're
you
young.
plant the new tree. When you put the root barrier along the sidewalk parallel to the edge of the sidewalk, you do that when you plant the new tree. If we come back now and cut the roots of the tree to replace the sidewalk, in some instances the arborist will say, sure, you can do that on a limited basis. In other instances, the arborist will say, don't do that, you're going to destabilize the tree. You're liable to have the tree fall over. There was a city in Southern California, I don't recall specifically which one, that did that with some ficus trees. One of them fell over and crushed a truck with a person in it. You don't want to go there, obviously. So, and that's what we're obviously going to avoid by not doing that. So we were trying to be sensitive to the safety on the sidewalks, but at the same time, in some cases, it's going to be one or the other. If we have to cut those major routes to replace the sidewalk, the tree may have to go. And yes, you're absolutely right. There is a tension there, and I would have to, in the end, I'd have to defer back to the council for direction as to how we want to prioritize those kinds of things, because that's under the current circumstances that Public Works is under, we are trying to protect the trees as much as possible.
And the other materials, the rubber or plastic sidewalks, you really can't use those in areas where the roots have uplifted the sidewalk a ton, because from everything and Sierra Madre's been considering this, I think, for years now, using rubber, right? You really can't do that if you have a huge bump in the sidewalk, right? I mean, you'd have to pour the rubber over it, and because my thinking is, well, for those really bad places, why not use a rubber, or why not use another material? It's not that much more expensive, rather than asphalting it every 10 years or whatever.
Some of the materials that are in here, the rubber pavers that Santa Monica uses, one of the reasons they went to that was because it is somewhat flexible, and because it comes in the form of large tiles. They can pull up, remove some roots underneath, and put it back down, versus concrete where you have to break it out and replace it altogether. And Santa Monica has been successful with doing that.
But you don't recommend it in here, right?
Again, with our limited staff and our limited funding, we're going to be really short in sidewalk repairs if we want to start going with some of those more expensive.
But it doesn't seem like it's that much more expensive. I mean, you're talking maybe $6 to $8 per square foot. I mean, you're fixing a 10 square foot patch.
But we're talking about thousands of square feet of sidewalk altogether. So, where do you start? We could pick an area and start. We could do a pilot program, for example. That is one way we could start and do something like that.
I'm just wondering if long-term it's more cost-effective. If you can put in the rubber mats and not have to replace that. I don't know what the life span is and when you'd have to ditch them and get new ones. But, the sidewalk plan, first of all, this was really good, extremely comprehensive. But let's be honest, it suggests a number of short-term fixes to long-term problems. I mean, there's no plan here to spend millions of dollars truly revamping our sidewalks. It's really just a number of asphalt, slurry seal, grinding, stuff that we've been doing, which we know complete temporary fixes, right? So we as council members, I think, have to think, well, is that really the most cost-effective way of doing this? Or do you spend a little bit more money up front so that in 5 years you're not in the same position? I don't know what the answer to that is, but
for now, it is the most cost-effective way to proceed, assuming that you don't go in and start making major cuts on tree root systems. We can start doing some of these other more current solutions, the rubber pavers, the plastic pavers, some of these other things, even decomposed granite sidewalks. Just rip the sidewalk out altogether and put that in. But as long as you've still got the root there to trip over, or as long as you've still got the root there to raise whatever new surface you've put in, you're still going to have a maintenance issue. There's just no getting around that. So what we're doing now is the most cost effective, and what we're finding is, since we did over the last year make such a concerted effort to make these temporary repairs, we are getting calls from people that have now I got one call from a resident that was infuriated because, and there's a photo of it in my presentation, he got home from work and found 3 asphalt ramps in front of his house. Why did we do this? He wants to be part of the sidewalk program, the partnership program now. So that is one solution, but even as we talk to him about doing that, we have to say, look, as long as that tree's there,
good luck on keeping
the sidewalk's going to come up again. So,
isn't it true that the cost numbers that you put into this plan, most of them don't include the cost of tree work at all?
None of them cover the cost of tree work.
So the costs that we're looking at here are all short-term fixes. They're not, there's nothing long-term
That's
in terms, except the A-level locations where you're doing some real replacement.
the costs that we're looking at here, I've listed as the costs for the short term, and I've listed also as the costs for the long-term but not permanent repairs.
Right.
The permanent repairs, you're going to add in tree removal and replacement costs.
Right.
And at that point, then you can put in the root barrier to try and protect against this happening again. And that may be a decision that we want to make at some point with our community forest. Is I had a tree commissioner back when I first started here that had been a tree care professional, and he pointed out that all trees have a lifespan. They're a living thing just like we are, and they have a lifespan, and it's not realistic to assume that that tree is going to live forever. Maybe we need to consider in the management of our community forest replacement of trees. But that's not a point that I see the city at this point. So, but that might be the long-term solution to the sidewalk issues is, as we go through this, we start replacing trees. But that's going to take a change in our outlook towards trees.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Director Inman. Any public questions or comments? And seeing none. Discussion?
The only discussion for me is the various alternatives. I'm really not clear on what the real difference between adopting this versus taking no action. I mean, really, what changes?
It's a good question. I think in my mind, it was just, we won't allocate the money or budget the money to fix the sidewalks. Is that what we wouldn't do?
The plan prioritizes things, comes up with a prioritization of the repair, so if you take no action, staff doesn't have direction on what the priorities are as we go forward.
But you'd probably just follow what you wrote.
We probably would, but it's good to have
Yeah.
council policy direction that we've got the priorities correct.
Yeah, okay. I'm good with it.
Any comments? I think it was an excellent job by management analyst Carlson and Director Inman. I think it's a great document, super comprehensive, and really educational. I didn't know that there were all those different options. I love how they call decomposed granite, which most of us call dirt, as an option. But no, I thought it was really good. So thank you for that.
I'd like to make a general comment. First, I think this is a magnum opus in the sidewalk literature. Management analyst Carlson, I'd like to commend you on this. I actually read through it all through a couple times. It took a great deal of time to put a lot of detailed analysis into it, because this is one of my pet peeves with our city, as I think you're aware. I don't see the problem as trees. I see the problem as a lack of will to pay for the things we need in this city. These are sidewalks, and they are expensive. Government costs money. And just look at the number in the staff report. Not taking into account tree replacement, we're talking about $660,000 to do these repairs. Well, we don't have that. So what are we really talking about here? What is the de facto situation in the city of Sierra Madre today? We do triage. We do sidewalk triage. And I think we all think better of ourselves. And I think we are proud of this city. I think we are proud of our mountain views. I think we are proud of our old buildings. I think we are proud of lots of things here. I see a disconnect, though, when we look at our infrastructure. I think we in the city have to we need a cold splash of water, and we need to start thinking about these things, because these kinds of issues are only going to get more expensive. The more we defer maintenance on these things, they're just going to continue to grow in expense. these trees aren't getting any smaller. They're going to get bigger, and so these numbers they're kind of phony because they're good today, but a year from now, who knows what it's going to cost to replace a sidewalk where the root's gone up 6 inches or 4 inches. So I think we need to fold this, frankly, into our discussion of the budget later this spring. I think we all need to have a frank talk here about what kind of city we want to live in. And are we going to take pride in these things, or are we going to slap asphalt patches on our sidewalks in front of our houses? And are we going to ask our residents to pay for the sidewalks? I personally would be willing to pay for a repair in front of my sidewalk. I may have to do that. But I don't think most people expect that. I think they feel like that's the government's responsibility. Okay, I'm going to climb down off my high horse. I really would like to see, I guess basically I would like to see a lot more progress than this, but I'm realistic. I think our staff is doing as good a job as they can do with the very extremely limited resources they have. But I'm just very disappointed. I feel like we could do better. I'll shut up now.
I appreciate your comments. I think they're good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, an easy way to judge a city as soon as you enter it is, what do the streets and sidewalks look like? And, we've historically just not had the budget or the money to, or haven't devoted the budget or money to it, and we've prioritized other things. And I think this is a good topic for the budget. I agree. Anything else? Okay, well, do we want to move on one of the options here?
Well, I think we should approve it.
I agree.
Adopt it, yeah.
Okay, is there a
I
motion?
move that we adopt the sidewalk plan as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Any items for future agendas? If not, yeah, I agree. If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Sleep fast.